Chapter 179. One day, legendary Big Sword, one of the players of Sword Maiden Online, opened the game forum out of habit. This was a necessary step before he entered the game. Legendary Big Sword liked to check the forum to see if there was anything new to explore before entering the game. In the end, a big piece of news popped up right away. The legendary Great Treasure Sword. He discovered that the forum, which had a light blue background, had started to change to a bright gold background. The glittering gold almost blinded legendary Big Sword. He was stunned at first, then his blood began to boil. He had seen this scene before, more than once. Last year, the year before, and 5 years ago, he had seen the forum change from blue to gold. If his memory served him right, then Sword Maiden Online would be the biggest and most explosive news of the year. Wait a minute. It did not seem to be the biggest news of the year. After all, after the commander had cleared the initial instance dungeon with an SSS class, there was no other news that could surpass this news. The only exception would be the appearance of a peerless sword emperor like Gujin official, the legendary Great Treasure Sword. He quickly scrolled to the top of the page, and sure enough, there was a glittering post at the top of the forum. Yin Kingland Billows Town 5 sees Yin Kingland Billows official publicity department. Our sect will officially launch a strategy for this year's hidden dungeon. Please click on the post to read the details. The post showed that the number of people who replied to it had already exceeded 100,000. The legendary Great Treasure Sword. Without a second's hesitation, he immediately clicked on the post. It took him more than 10 minutes to completely digest the content of the post. First of all, the post briefly introduced the background of the hidden dungeon, letting Big Sword know that the plot revolved around King Arthur Artoria. At the same time, it was also very insidiously revealed that 3 sword sects, including Yaowang's sword sect, had already started the dungeon a month earlier and had been stuck at the 60% progress for more than 25 days. The reason why Storm Waves wanted to publicize this was to discuss the 3 sword sections. He wanted to tell the masses that these 3 sword sects were trying to monopolize this information. They were so narrow-minded that they didn't tell the average player. They treated the other players as fools. Unlike their Kangland Billows, after unlocking the instance dungeon, they immediately announced the news of the instance dungeon so that everyone could know the details. At the same time, they had not succeeded for a month and were stuck at 60% of the progress. This made the players doubt the strength of the 3 sword sections. In the past, the longest time taken to complete a hidden dungeon was 1 month. This time, however, they had only cleared 60% of the area after a month. Could it be that the strength of the 3 sword sects had fallen to such a trashy state? Next, however, Storm Waves also exposed the main clearers of the 3 sword sections. Watermelon Gentleman who pulled Strawberry, the U siblings, and Magic Pen Lansong River. These were the top 30 players on the list of famous swords, virtual list. This proved that the clearers of the 3 sword sects were not weak. This was especially so when they saw the commander's name. This new player, who had created the biggest news of the year just a week or 2 ago, had actually grown to the level of a famed sword. He had even participated in the strategy to clear the hidden dungeon. This guy's gaming life was a little too awesome. Maybe this military governor is the next Yujin, and the next Yaowang. Everyone who saw the post could not help but have this thought. In the game, there would be a unique character born every decade. In this decade, this person might be the military governor. At the very least, the military governor was standing at the forefront of all potential competitors. After reading the post, Legendary Sword closed the post and refreshed the forum's homepage. Based on the previous Kangland Billows practice, they would soon open a live stream guide, which would continuously update the progress of the clearers of the hidden dungeon. Sure enough, after Legendary Sword refreshed the page for 10 minutes, another post from the Kangland Billows publicity department was pushed to the top. It was quickly set to be the most important post. The title of the post was Latest Hidden Dungeon, King Arthur's Betrayal Guide Live Post. When he opened the post, there was only one post. The post revealed the members of the 4 clearers of the Kangland Billows. The first, second, third, and fourth clearers were revealed. Although the clearers of the second, third, and fourth clearers were famous sword-level players, they were much dimmer than the clearers of the first clearers. First clearers of the Kanglen Billows, team leader, Dragon Feather, 12th on the list of famous swords, virtual list team member, Gentleman, 3rd on the list of famous swords, virtual list Fair Lady, 5th on the list of famous swords, virtual list Shuai Lei Xing, 4th on the list of famous swords, virtual list Ling Yun, 7th on the list of famous swords, virtual list Munyan, 10th on the list of famous swords. Virtual list from these 6 people's list of famous swords. Virtual list, it could be seen that the Kanglen Billows had gathered the strongest members of its sword sect into the first clearers. Apart from the party leader, the other members who were ranked in the top 10 formed an incomparably terrifying party. Disregarding the problem of clearing the instance dungeon, if they were dragged out to fight, this party would be able to sweep away all the famed sword-level parties. There was no party stronger than this party. Ding dong. This was a notification from the original poster. The legendary Great Sword. After a quick refresh, they saw the second message from the original poster. The first team took less than 2 minutes to clear 10% of the instance dungeon's progress. The important NPC, Ardwolf, did not suffer any damage. To expel the filth, you need to use special tools. I've hidden these tools in a secret place. After you rescue Artoria, take her there. Just like what Gahan and the others had experienced, Ardwolf had lost his ability to speak to resist the invasion of the filth. He could only kneel on the ground in pain and struggle against the filth. When the first clearers of the Kanglen Billows entered the game, they chose to rush directly from Terminal T3 to Parking Lot P2. Although they did not have sword maidens like Alandet who could absorb damage, and although each of them had suffered varying degrees of damage, when they rushed out of Terminal T3, they were still in good condition. However, when they rushed out of Terminal T3, they were still in good condition. None of their personal shields were damaged to less than 90%, and they arrived at the battlefield 5 seconds earlier than Guhan's team. It was not an exaggeration, but the first clearers of the Kanglen Billows team were much stronger than Yao Guang's sword faction. Leader, what should we do now? A man in black asked Dragon Feather, the leader of the team. According to the ranking of the list of famous swords, virtual ranking, Dragon Feather was ranked 12th, and he was the weakest in the entire clearers. However, he was able to become the leader of the entire team, and none of his team members disobeyed him. This was all because of his terrifying scheming ability. Long Yu was the president of the Vast Expanse Hall, the head of Gu Jin's Brain Trust, and the successor that he had carefully cultivated. His ability to scheme and scheme was breathtaking. The world generally believed that 2 Lansong rivers might be worth as much as 1 Long Yu, if not more. Take him with us. Dragon Feather bit his fingerbone. This was a special habit of Dragon Feather. Whenever he entered a state of high concentration, he would involuntarily bite his fingerbone. Whenever this happened, it meant that Dragon Feather was thinking hard. Take him with us? The man in black was stunned. Take Ardwolf with us into the underground temple of Terminal 2. Deep down, the man in black did not want to take Ardwolf with them. The reason was very simple. Ardwolf's current state was no different from a burden. If they brought him along, it would inevitably affect the team's combat ability. Moreover, Ardwolf was a very unstable factor. If he failed to fight against the filth, entered a dark state, and started attacking the team from the inside, it might be fatal. Although they looked down on the clearers of the Hung Mountain Sword faction, Ardwolf was able to kill the entire clearers of the Hung Mountain Sword faction within 10 minutes after he entered the dark state. With his strength, he would definitely cause the team to suffer. That's right. Take him with us. I have a use for him. Dragon Feather put down his finger. Munyan, I'll leave Ardwolf to you. Let's go to Terminal 2. The Munyan that Dragon Feather was talking about was the man in black. Munyan knew that his hesitation had caused Dragon Feather to be unhappy, so he had asked him to take Ardwolf with him as a punishment. This was a very generous punishment. Compared to other punishments, Munyan was still very happy. So, Munyan climbed onto the frenzied Ardwolf and followed the rest of the team towards Terminal T2. From there, the great storm of Azure Waves and Yawang's sword faction had a disagreement. Gahan's side chose to let Ardwolf fight on his own and break through Terminal 2 in the most complete way possible. The great storm of Azure Waves' side chose to take Ardwolf with them and break through T2 together. Both sides had their own ideas and philosophies. So who was right? Would this affect the final outcome of the dungeon? Let's wait and see. Chapter 180. After entering Terminal T2, Gahan didn't change his strategy from before. He still worked with Hongyu to clear out the Yuan Ko near the left intersection. The only difference was that the process of Gahan personally wielding the King of Yu's Gojin sword became Etion venting her anger on these pitiful Yuan Ko. Before entering Terminal T2, Gahan called Etion back. Originally, Etion didn't want to come back, but when she heard that Gahan and Hongyu were in the same group, she didn't want to come back even more. In the end, Gahan used their agreement to threaten her, saying that if she didn't come back, it would be a violation of their agreement, and he would force Etion to return to the sword. Etion didn't want to see Hongyu, nor did she want to return to the scabbard, so she could only vent her anger on these pitiful Yuan Ko. Although Etion was a treasured sword maiden, her swordsmanship could crush most famed sword maidens. For example, King Yu. In terms of swordsmanship, even 10 King, you wouldn't be able to defeat Etion. As a result, these Yuan silhouettes were pitiful. They were clearly powerful ghost and soul Yuan silhouettes, but in the end they were like pumpkins. They were cut in half by Etion's sword. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water. Etion didn't waste any extra strength. Sword Maiden Hongyu was dumbfounded. It was Sword Maiden Hongyu, not Sword Wielder Hongyu. Hongyu also released her own Sword Maiden, and then leisurely strolled behind Gahan. With these two powerful Sword Maidens, there was indeed nothing to worry about. While she and Gahan had nothing to do, Hongyu asked a question that had been stuck in her throat for a long time. Military Governor, did you know that those Yuan Ko in Terminal T3 wouldn't chase after us? That's right, I know. Gahan didn't hide it, and admitted it honestly. Why? Why are you so sure? Hongyu was even more puzzled. You've only entered this dungeon once, and you didn't enter Terminal T3 the last time. Besides, the information we gave you only said T3 terminal is full of Jiao class and Dragon class Yuan Ko. It takes too much time and energy to pass through Terminal T3 foot. How do you know that after we escape from Terminal T3, those Yuan Ko won't chase after us? Did you find some information somewhere? Information? I don't have any information. It is as you said, this is my second time entering this instance dungeon. In the information you gave me, there was only that one sentence about Terminal 3. Gahan smiled. Actually, as long as you think about some common sense issues, the direction of your thinking before was too stubborn. Think about it from a different angle, and you'll have a different idea. What angle? Yuan Ko's angle? Hongyu listened to Gahan's words and became even more curious. From what angle did Gahan think? Of course not from Yuan Ko's angle. How would I know what Yuan Ko's mind is thinking? Gahan pointed to his head. We can't think about things from the point of view of us professional players. We should think about these things from the point of view of ordinary players. Ordinary players' point of view? Hongyu muttered to herself. She was not stupid. When she heard Gahan's words, she vaguely had some ideas. Gahan then said, looking at the hidden dungeons of Sword Maiden Online for the past 200 years, in the end, they were all open to ordinary players. The strength of ordinary players cannot be mentioned in the same breath as us. Even first-class players like us can't clear this dungeon after a month. Then, doesn't that mean that ordinary players can't clear this dungeon for the rest of their lives? That's impossible. In the end, this instance dungeon is still meant for ordinary players to grind. Perhaps it'll be difficult to obtain an evaluation of S rank or above, but it won't be difficult to obtain an evaluation of E or D rank. You mean this dungeon is too difficult as we think it is? In fact, there is an easier way to clear this dungeon. Hongyu understood immediately and drew inferences. That's right. In order to give ordinary players hope of clearing this dungeon. No, it's not hope, it's a certainty. Therefore, there must be something in this game that we have overlooked. As long as you think in this direction, everything will suddenly become clear. Everyone in this dungeon is stuck at the 60% mark. What does this mean? It means that there must be a place that we didn't pass correctly, causing us to be stuck at the 60% mark. You and I both know the strength of the corrupted Artoria. Unless our entire team is replaced with Spirit Sword level Sword Maidens, then we have a chance of defeating her. But this is a famed Sword level dungeon, and Spirit Sword level monsters can appear in this dungeon. Therefore, the correct way to clear the 60% mark is not to defeat Artoria, but to find another way. So you thought of Ardwolf. Hong Yu's eyes lit up as she listened. That's right. There's only one person who has successfully escaped from the corruption in this dungeon, and that is Ardwolf. Therefore, Ardwolf must have a way to remove the corruption. Therefore, if we want to remove the corruption of Artoria, we must save Ardwolf's life. So, you thought of rushing to the battlefield in advance and saving Shuda before he attacks Ardwolf. Hong Yu continued. Yes, I remember the first time I saw Ardwolf. He was covered in wounds and had lost a lot of blood. In such a state, he was no different from a dying person. How could he resist the corruption? As long as Ardwolf is healthy enough, there is hope of saving his life. If we want to protect Ardwolf from any harm, we can only reach the battlefield as quickly as possible. After the end of the last instance dungeon, I spent half an hour studying the map of Xinying Airport. I found that if we enter the instance dungeon and do not take detours, we will be able to reach the battlefield within 1 minute and 40 seconds by moving in a straight line instead of taking detours. If it's an ordinary famed sword level player, they won't be as fast as we are. In reality, they will need less than 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which is twice as fast as we did before, which is nearly 6 minutes. Ardwolf's strength is also quite good. He can resist Shuda for some time. At the very least, it won't be a problem for him to maintain a relatively healthy state for the 2 minutes and 30 seconds after the start of the dungeon. Shuda's strength is not that strong. Ordinary players will be able to kill him with some effort. So, even ordinary players can save Ardwolf's life as long as they walk in a straight line to the battlefield. That way, even ordinary players will be able to get through the first stage of the dungeon. That brings me back to my original question. How do you know that the Marshal of Terminal 3 won't chase us out of Terminal 3? Also, we only managed to get out because we're strong enough. The Steel Centipede's shield was almost shattered when he got close. If it were an ordinary player, it would be a problem for them to make it out. After beating around the bush for a long time, Hong Yu asked the original question. First of all, I want to correct your point of view. It's not that ordinary players can't make it out of Terminal T3. Earlier, I was in pursuit of speed and to deal with unexpected situations. That's why Steel Centipede was able to absorb a large amount of damage. That's why he looked so miserable. The rest of us actually didn't suffer any damage at all. If it's a team of ordinary players, as long as they have enough teamwork, they can split up and constantly change the main damage taker. Everyone can take about 80% of the damage from the shield energy. Then, there's a considerable chance that they can make it out of Terminal T3. If they accumulate enough experience, a team of ordinary swordsmen with average talent has about a 90% chance of making it out. That's already a very high chance. Then, there's the crux of your question. Why didn't Yuan co-chase us out? Gahan paused for a moment before continuing. There could be many reasons. Maybe they're sick and can't leave Terminal T3. Maybe they're guarding something and can't leave Terminal T3. Who knows what their reasons are? I can come up with more than a dozen reasons. The specific reason is not important. What's important is that the system needs such a reason. The system needs such a reason. Hong Yu is confused again. Since the only way for ordinary players to reach 60% progress is to ensure that the coyotes don't die. The only way to ensure that the coyotes don't die is to pass through Terminal T3, and the only way to pass through Terminal T3 is to prevent those Yuan Co. from chasing them out. Then, the system can only come up with a reason to prevent those Yuan Co. from chasing them out of the terminal. Only then can ordinary players have a chance of clearing the dungeon. Otherwise, even if this dungeon is officially opened, ordinary players won't be able to clear it. Then, what's the point of opening this dungeon? After listening to Gahan's explanation, Hong Yu was speechless. It turned out that the mastermind was the system. It was the system that prevented those Yuan Ko from chasing them out and ensured that ordinary players could successfully save the coyotes' lives. This system is really boring. What's with so many twists and turns? Just lower the level of the Yuan Ko in Terminal T3. Or just delay the battle between Ardwolf and Shuda a little. Why do you have to make it so complicated? Hong Yu stuck out her tongue and complained weakly. This system was really boring. If it hadn't been so boring to design, so many twists and turns, their team might have already passed the instance dungeon. They had wasted a month's time for no reason, and they had even dragged the great waves of Azure Waves into it. Yes, the system is really boring. If it wasn't boring enough, how could it become a bat system? Gahan seemed to be muttering to himself, but when he spoke, his eyes were staring at the blurry Terminal T3 in the distance. Gahan had a feeling that the setting of this Terminal T3 might not be as simple as he imagined. Perhaps it still played a crucial role. Chapter 181. The two of you are too slow. When Gahan and Hong Yu slowly arrived at the center of Terminal T2, Etion and Hong Yu had already cleared out all the Yuan Ko in the vicinity. The Sword Lady, Hong Yu, stood obediently at the agreed position, waiting for Gahan and Etion. However, Etion was nowhere to be seen. It was only when Etion took the initiative to speak that Gahan raised his head and discovered that the Sword Lady with a personality was sitting on a chandelier that was more than 10 meters above the ground, leisurely drinking wine from her gourd. Gahan glanced at Etion's status panel. The gourd that was used to accumulate Dukong wine, Ma, Pumandala, and green plum wine only had less than 5 mouthfuls of Dukong wine left. Etion had finished the rest. Gahan looked at Etion's status panel and was angry. He said to Etion through the sword mark, Etion, why don't you have a plan? There are only 5 mouthfuls left. What if you don't have enough skills? It's okay, ugly husky. None of the Yuan Ko here are worthy of this heroine's skills. I burp. Sigh. Etion's Sword Lady was indeed very powerful. Unfortunately, her personality was too sloppy. Gahan suddenly felt that the Sword Lady in real life should not be so fixated on Etion. She should change her target, such as the second-rank Yuchong sword. That might be a good choice. Back to the main topic. When Yu siblings and Steel Centipede's magic pen had cleared their respective areas, they also gathered in the middle of the hall. Etion didn't wait for Guhan to urge him. He jumped down from a chandelier and landed right next to Steel Centipede, startling him. Oh my god, I was scared to death. Pinman patted his chest. He was really scared by Etion. Otherwise, he would not have blurted out such words. Hey, military governor, let me ask you, is this Sword Lady Etion? Yu pulled on Gahan's sleeve and asked curiously. Yes, she is the Sword Maiden, Etion. Gahan nodded. It really is Lady Etion. Is this the Sword Maiden Etion who is known as the #1 treasured sword and the 7th famed sword? Looking at Etion's confident and handsome demeanor, singing and drinking to his heart's content, Yu's eyes started to see stars. Legend has it that 1,000 years ago, there was a woman who impersonated a man who could make all the women obsessed with his handsomeness, to the extent that they were bent for life. In particular, her portrayal of Dongfang Bubi was an everlasting classic. She had the kind of shocking temperament that could make men and women forget about their gender differences and fall in love with her at the same time. Logically speaking, if Etion didn't speak and just close her eyes while drinking wine, she would also have this kind of temperament. But as soon as Etion opened its mouth and the words ugly husky came out, this sense of beauty disappeared. TSK, this really is Lady Heaven Reliance. The #1 treasured sword and the 7th famed sword, Lady Heaven Reliance. Steel Centipede, who had recovered from his shock, quickly circled around Etion. Steel Centipede wasn't seduced by Heavenly Sword's beauty. He was just stunned by the identity of Heavenly Sword Goddess. He didn't expect that the commander he looked down on, the commander who had only entered the game less than 2 weeks ago, and the treasured sword level sword mistress, was actually Heavenly Sword Goddess. This was even more unbelievable than telling Steel Centipede that Guhan was just an ancient sword wielder just yesterday. As for the number 1 treasured sword and the 7th famed sword, it was the highest evaluation of Eteon. It was easy to understand. It meant that Eteon's strength was the number 1 treasured sword tier and the 7th famed sword tier. This was an amazing evaluation. Although the top few sword maidens of each tier were even stronger than some of the higher tier sword maidens, a sword maiden like Eteon, who was able to obtain the 7th famed sword tier as a treasured sword tier, was the only one who could do so. The reason for this was that Eteon's combat strength was simply too strong after drinking, especially when she used her ultimate skill. She could kill anything that stood in her way. No one could stop her. If all the sword ladies present were to fight, apart from the shadow-bearing sword and the dual sword combination, no one else would be able to defeat the heavenly sword at the same level. Military Governor, how did you get your hands on Lady Heaven Reliance? Steel Centipede still found it hard to believe. Didn't you say that Lady Heaven Reliance hasn't appeared in the game for 100 years? Did you step on dog shit? You're so lucky. Even if I stepped on dog shit, I wouldn't be that lucky. Yu Sikong continued. Think about it. Military Governor's famed sword tier sword maiden, King Ugojin's sword. That's a sword maiden that hasn't appeared in 40 years. Also, UCU added. And Military Governor's ancient sword tier sword maiden, Qingpin's sword. We've never even heard of it. Yeah, that's so King infuriating. Military Governor, you can apply for the title of a rare sword maiden collector. The crowd praised in unison. Speaking of Qingpin, I went online to look up the latest edition of Ancient Sword Records yesterday. It turns out that Qingpin is a sword maiden transformed from a sword maiden. Someone had just successfully synchronized her in real life. That's why I couldn't find any information about Qingpin in Ancient Sword Records. This time, I specifically added information about Qingpin's sword. Han Yu giggled as she spat out a piece of information that Guhan didn't even know. That's right. Because he had been looking up information about the dungeon for the past few days, Gahan didn't even take a look at the latest edition of Ancient Sword Records. He had no idea that Qingpin's sword information had already been added to Ancient Sword Records. However, since it was already in Ancient Sword Records, Gahan still wanted to know the ranking of Qingpin's sword in Ancient Sword Records. So that's how it is. UCU exclaimed. Hey, about that. What's Qingpin's sword's ranking in Ancient Sword Records? Hearing UCU asking the question that he wanted to know the most, Gahan secretly gave UCU a thumbs up. He then pricked up his ears, wanting to hear what the people who made up Ancient Sword Records had to say about Qingpin's sword. Oh, 6,235th place. Hongyu didn't keep him in suspense and gave the answer directly. What? I remember that the total number of natural ancient swords is 6,234. Why is Qingpin's sword's ranking lower than the total number? UCU said in disbelief. Stupid sister. Yu Sikong patted her sister's head. With the addition of Qingpin's sword, isn't the total number 6,235? What's so strange about Qingpin's sword's ranking at 6,235th? Ahem. There's no time to talk nonsense. We'll go underground from the middle entrance. With an awkward expression, Gahan forcefully ended the conversation and took the lead to enter the underground altar from the middle entrance. This bunch of ignorant people actually dared to put my Qingpin sword at the bottom of the Ancient Sword Records. If I have the chance, I'll definitely take Qingpin's sword and give them a hard slap in the face. In the past, Gahan wouldn't be angry over a mere illusory ranking. But now he was so angry. There was no other way. Gahan was poisoned by a poison called Qingpin's sword. 35 minutes later, in another instance dungeon, King Arthur's Betrayal, the team from Great Ocean Waves had also completely cleared out the entire surface of Terminal T2. They were faster than Guhan's team by about 2 minutes, even though one of their team members was carrying a coyote that had no combat power and was only a burden. Monian, how's the Aardwolf? After long you saw that the surface of Terminal T2's entrance was cleared, he asked the man in black about the situation of the Aardwolves he was responsible for looking after. It wasn't good at first. It was moving around crazily, talking nonsense, and acting like a lunatic. Monian's expression turned ugly. It seemed like he had suffered a lot at the Aardwolf's hands. It's fine now. 3 minutes ago, it quieted down. It's not moving at all. It's still unconscious. I don't know how it's doing. Long Yu bit his knuckles out of habit. This meant that he was thinking. In that case, Monian, you'll continue to look after the Aardwolf. I'll arrange an easier route for you later. Long Yu, which route should we take next? Upright Gentleman, the second in command of the team, and the only one who dared to call Long Yu by his name instead of Captain, asked Long Yu as he held up the information on the Hung Mountain Sword sect. Based on the Hung Mountain Sword sect's choice, it seems like the left route is the most appropriate. It's the easiest route to break through to the dimensional altar. No, we're not going the left route. Long Yu bit his knuckles again. He glanced at Upright Gentleman and said, "We're going to the middle route." Why? I need a reason. The left route is obviously the easiest route to break through. Upright Gentleman said, tapping the information in his hand. The Hung Mountain Sword sect has very little information on the middle route. We only know that it's a test. If we fail, we'll be restricted for a whole day. Our progress has been broadcasted live on the forum. I have to take responsibility for Great Storm Wave's reputation. Do I even need to explain? Long Yu seemed to have some misgivings about Upright Gentleman. Although he was reluctant, he still explained, the left route is indeed easier. We just need to defeat the Yuan Ko guarding the checkpoint. But it's very easy for our elite clearers. For other players, the left route is guarded by powerful Yuan Ko guards. Without any technique, it's undoubtedly a path of death. It's not easy at all. Just like in Terminal 3, it's impossible for the system to arrange a path that ordinary players can't pass as the correct path. There's only the middle path. As long as you score high enough, you can even reach the dimensional altar without fighting. What else is more suitable for those trash than this? Perhaps there's even a question bank here. As long as someone sorts out the questions in the question bank and publishes them on the internet, even an idiot can pass the middle path. So I'm certain that this is the correct path. How about it? Do you understand? Upright Gentleman put away the information and stopped talking. This meant that he agreed with Long Yu's explanation. Long Yu bit his knuckles and ordered, "Everyone, follow me. We're going down the middle route." Legendary Sword, who had been refreshing the forum, finally saw the latest news posted by the original poster of latest hidden dungeon. King Arthur's Betrayal Strategy Guide, Quest 4 completed. Great Storm Waves Dungeon Progress, 20% completed. Chapter 182. Once again, they entered the underground altar from the middle path. There was no difference from the last time. It was still the old man, Liu Ban, who wanted to give Guhan and the others a college entrance examination. There were no changes to the subjects of the examination. Guhan was still responsible for the history exercises. After the first few multiple-choice questions, Guhan was surprised to find that there were 3 repeated questions. What did this mean? This meant that there were not many questions in this instance dungeon. Out of the 8 exercises, there were 3 repeated questions. According to his calculations, the number of questions in the question bank should be around 80 to 200. This was a very low number. Generally, there were more than tens of thousands of questions in the question bank. However, there were less than 200 questions in the question bank. This meant that as long as someone was willing to collect the questions, they could quickly restore 95% of the entire question bank. That way, even players who did not understand any of the subjects could rely on rote memorization to get a high score and get into the second or first book. They would not need to face 2 powerful opponents to reach the dimensional altar. Gohan's discovery just happened to confirm the truth that Long Yu had guessed before. That man was truly a terrifying man. These 8 multiple-choice questions, in addition to the short answer question, Gohan perfectly answered all of them. As long as he answered the last short answer question correctly, Gohan would be able to get full marks in this history exam. When Gohan entered the examination room for the last short answer question, he was surprised to find that this question was repeated. It was also the scene of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang killing the imperial concubine with tears in his eyes. With the first scene, Gahan could calmly watch the group of puppets act in front of him. The eunuchs came out to report the news. Then, the 1,000 ox guards came out to ask for Yang Guifei's death. Gahan nodded in agreement. Then, 2 soldiers rushed in and pulled Yang Guifei out. Then, he heard a somewhat familiar voice. "Your Majesty, save me. Your Majesty, Yuan does not want to die. Yuan wants to accompany Your Majesty for the rest of her life. Your Majesty, save Yuan." Even the lines haven't changed. Can't the designers of this puppet theater be more thoughtful? However, something that shocked Gahan happened. This time, the woman that was dragged out didn't look like King Yu, but Etion. This was quite interesting. Why did it look like Etion? Could it be because he had used the heavenly sword more often in this instant's dungeon? Alright, since it was Etion who was going to act as Yang Guifei, Gahan didn't feel any pressure at all. "Your Majesty, I'm Yuan, your favorite Yuan." Although Gahan didn't say a word to stop Yang Yuan from being dragged out, Yang Yuan somehow broke free from the 3 soldiers and staggered to Gahan's back before hugging his waist tightly. "Your Majesty, Yuan knows that you can't bear to part with Yuan. You can't bear to part with Yuan. Your Majesty, please save Yuan. Your Majesty." Chun Xuanli knelt down heavily in front of Gahan again and continued to say the lines that he had already said before. "Your Majesty, please put aside your personal feelings and think about the hearts of the army and the people. Your Majesty, Yang Yuan must die. She must be killed. Otherwise, the hearts of the soldiers will not be at ease." Next, the thousands of puppet soldiers kneeling on the ground raised their heads and looked at Gahan. They used their eyes to tell Gahan that if he didn't kill Yang Yuan, they would rebel like last time. "Your Majesty," Yang Yuan, who looked exactly like Etion, was so frightened that her beautiful face trembled. She hugged Gahan even tighter, unwilling to let go for even a moment. She begged bitterly, "Your Majesty, please save Yuan. Yuan doesn't want to die. I don't want to leave Your Majesty." "Sai Yuan, you are wrong." Gahan sighed and patted the head of Yang Yuan, who looked like Etion. "Everyone will die one day. It may be as heavy as Mount Tai, or as light as a goose feather. Yuan, you died for my Tang dynasty. I will always remember you. Don't worry, after I die, I will go to the netherworld to find you." Probably because he was angered by Etion's performance today, Gahan actually said such a line that was very suitable for the plot. Then, he firmly pried Yang Yuan's arm away and said to Chun Xuanli, "General Chun, you are right. If Yang Yuan doesn't die, the people won't be convinced. Go find a white silk and send the imperial concubine on her way." "Yes, Your Majesty." Chun Xuanli stood up excitedly. Then, he pulled out a piece of white silk from somewhere. Then, the 2 wolf-like soldiers dragged Yuan away from Gahan's side. Chun Xuanli personally grabbed both ends of the white silk and put it around Yang Yuan's neck. He was about to break Yang Yuan's throat. "Your Majesty, save me. This concubine loves Your Majesty the most. Your Majesty, you promised this concubine, regardless of life or death, you will always be with this concubine, Your Majesty." Yang Yuan cried out intermittently like an old cat. As she cried out, Gahan couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. Even Etion's face, which he originally hated, had suddenly become a bit more moving. The Han Emperor valued women and desired to topple the country. The Yang family had a daughter who had just grown up and was raised in a boudoir. She was born beautiful and could not be abandoned. She was chosen to be by the Emperor's side. She looked back and smiled charmingly, and all the beauties in the 6 palaces lost their color. The servants helped her up, delicate and weak. It was the time for a new person to receive the Emperor's grace. The spring night was bitter and short, and the sun rose high. From then on, the Emperor did not attend morning court. There were 3,000 beauties in the harem, and 3,000 beauties were doted on her. At this moment, background music suddenly sounded. Then, it was a long, sad rendition of Li Bai's song of Everlasting Regret. That's right, the Song of Everlasting Regret was written by Li Bai. It had nothing to do with Bai Jui. This was the consensus of the historians in the year 3001. When Gahan heard this, he realized that it was played with a F asterisk king eru. Damn it, isn't this a little too against the rules? Using such a sad instrument like the eru to play a song of everlasting regret. What is the meaning of this? Also, it's been 3 minutes. A normal person should have been strangled to death by now, right? How could this woman with Etion's ugly face stretch out an arm to beg him to save her? Your scriptwriter was sent by Qiangyao, right? The 40 points he lost last time clearly told Gohan that as long as he didn't care about Yang Yuhuan's life and death and let her be strangled according to history, he would be able to get points right. In the beginning, Gohan had indeed thought that way. After all, this Etion made him feel so uncomfortable. So why should he care about her life? However, at this moment, Gohan's heart was in a mess. Seeing his own sword mistress pleading in front of him, Gohan's heart was still in a mess. Then let me ask you again. Since you know that she isn't your sword mistress, why are you still protecting her? Suddenly, this question surfaced in Gohan's mind. This was what Liu Ban had asked him after he had finished answering the previous question. Gohan clearly remembered that his answer was like this. My sword mistress, even if she only has the same face, I, the military governor, will not allow any harm to befall her. Let her go. Gohan's eyes glinted as he flew over to Yang Yuhuan's side and sent the 2 soldiers who were trapping Yang Yuhuan flying. Then, he tore the white ribbon around her neck and hugged Yang Yuhuan in his arms. It's just 40 points. How can I, the military governor, lose my reputation for 40 points? Gohan unsheathed the Yu King's Gojian sword from his back. During the previous battle, the Yu King hadn't been by his side, so Gohan had only been able to use the ancient sword grade Qingpin sword to fight. This time, Gohan had used the heavenly sword to disappear. The Yu King's Gojian sword was still on his back and scathed. With the Yu King's Gojian sword in hand and an additional 1,500 quarks of sword essence, Gohan's strength had increased severalfold. This time, I might not be your match, but don't even think about taking me down so easily. I will make you puppets pay the price. Gohan pointed the tip of his sword at Shun Xuanli's nose. Although I don't understand what your majesty means, your majesty, I sincerely ask that your majesty reconsider. However, this subject, Chen Xuanli pleads for your majesty to reconsider. When Chen Xuanli heard Gohan's words, he immediately kowtowed heavily on the ground. Your majesty, please reconsider. More than 1,000 puppets shouted in unison. Just like the previous time, as long as Gohan didn't agree to their request, a battle would be unavoidable. There's no need to reconsider, my sword lady. Even if she only has the same face, I, the military governor, will not allow any harm to befall her. Gohan repeated what he had said to Liu Ban. However, this time, Gohan's reply was even more resolute and decisive. Your Majesty, forgive me. When Shan Xuanli saw that Gohan had made up his mind, he kowtowed to Gohan one last time before standing up. 1,000 bull guards, raise your spears. Send the imperial consort on her way. More than 1,000 soldiers raised their wooden spears at the same time and aimed them at Gohan and the heavenly sword behind him. This time, I will show you something new. In the previous battle, Gohan had only had the Qingpin sword, so he had only been able to use his 9 swords of the mysterious sky to fight the 1,000 bull guards. However, this time, with the Yu King sword in hand, Gohan's battle tactics had many new tricks. As long as these tactics and techniques were used appropriately, Gohan might not necessarily lose to the 1,000 bull guards. Go, send His Majesty and the Imperial concubine on their way. With Chen Xuanli's order, more than 1,000 bull guards charged towards Gohan. Courting death, Gohan's Yu King Go Jian only needed a single slash to decapitate 1,000 bull guard puppet. Following that, Gohan followed up with a mysterious Heaven 9 swords. Sword descends the abyss Sword Chi, reducing the 8 puppets behind him that were attempting to attack him to dust. The remaining 5 puppets behind the 8 puppets were also sliced in 2 by the residual Sword Chi. Although a single Sword Chi could kill 13 spear-wielding puppets, the sword essence in Gohan's body could only support 40 Sword Chi at most. Multiplied by 13 people, it was only 500,000 bull guards. There were more than 1,000 bull guards here, as well as Chun Xuanli, who had frightening offensive and defensive abilities. It seemed like there was no way Gahan could win this battle. But was that really the case? At the place where the 13 spear-wielding puppets had died, a young man with bulging muscles crawled out from the corpses of the puppets. Above his head were two dark, purple words, 100 sword slave. This was the Yu King's sword's passive skill, King of 100 In battle, every attack has a 5% chance of summoning a 100 sword slave. The sword slave has 15% of the attributes of a Yu King, Gojian. Based on the grade of the sword lady, the maximum number of sword slaves that can be summoned is 3, and the maximum number of sword slaves is 20. Chapter 183. The 100 sword slaves were a type of slave that existed in the Yu Kingdom during the spring and autumn period. Legend had it that these sword slaves were the strongest men personally chosen by the King of Yu, who had committed capital crimes. The King of Yu taught them exquisite sword techniques and gave them sharp swords, training them into experts in sword techniques, and called them sword slaves. During times of war, the King of Yu would release these sword slaves onto the battlefield and tell them that as long as they charged at the front and survived 3 battles, they would be pardoned from death and given a new lease on life. As a result, these sword slaves' morale was greatly boosted, and they fought bravely and fearlessly. In the various battles between Wu and Yu, they became the most terrifying weapons of war in the Yu Kingdom. Although the Yu Kingdom was proficient in forging and could forge sharp swords and sturdy armor, the 100 sword slaves were completely naked when they fought. However, these 100 sword slaves were completely naked when they fought. They didn't even wear a thin layer of clothing in exchange for the fastest movements and the sharpest reactions. They used their flesh and blood to fight crazily, and their enemies would tremble in fear. The most famous incident was during the Wu Yue War. When the King of Wu heard that the King of Yu, Yin Chang, had passed away and the young crown prince, Go Jian, had succeeded the throne, he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to destroy the Yu Kingdom. He sent out 30,000 of the most elite soldiers in the country to attack the Yu Kingdom. In a hurry, the King of Yu, Go Jian, could only gather around 15,000 soldiers to fight with the Wu army at Changli. He believed that since he had enough soldiers and resources, as well as geniuses like Sun Wu and Wu Zixu, defeating the Yu Kingdom would be a piece of cake. Thus, he didn't adopt Sun Wu's suggestion. Instead, he planned to openly defeat the Yu Kingdom with a frontal army. At that time, Go Jian was very young and very cunning. He knew that if they fought head-on, he wouldn't be able to defeat the Yu Kingdom's elite soldiers no matter what. Thus, he hid his elite soldiers at the back of the battlefield and in the forests on both sides, while he led the central army to confront the 100 Yu sword slaves and Go Jian's army. Before the confrontation, Go Jian explained his plan to the sword slaves and promised them that from now on, he would give their descendants the best life and ensure the happiness of their families. Thus, on the day of the battle, these sword slaves lined up in 3 rows and walked directly to a position very close to the Wu army. Wu Jun thought that these sword slaves were here to fight to the death, but he was shocked to discover that these sword slaves stopped 300 meters away from Wu Jun. Then, one by one, they pulled out their own swords, cut open their own bellies, and pulled out their own intestines before committing suicide. Although the Wu army had been through hundreds of battles, they had never seen an army voluntarily commit suicide in front of a battle formation and even pull out their own intestines. In an instant, they were extremely curious about the actions of the sword slaves. All their attention was focused on the sword slaves as they watched the sword slaves commit suicide one by one. They had completely neglected the defense of the flanks. It was only when the elite Vietnamese troops charged out from the flanks that the Wu army was unable to face them in time and was defeated by the sneak attack. Go Jian then led his army towards the king of Wu, Helu. Senior physician Ling Gufu of the state of Yu rushed to He Lv's side and cut off one of his toes. 7 days later, He Lv's wound became infected and became festering. From then on, the 100 sword slaves of the state of Yu became famous, causing all the other countries to fear them. These 100 sword slaves had appeared on the battlefield in response to the summons of the king of Yu, Gojian. Other than the leather around their waists, these sword slaves had no other defenses. However, they did not fear death. The moment they were summoned, they waved the weapons in their hands and charged towards the 1,000 bull guards. The 1,000 bull guards were the elite troops of the Tang dynasty. Dealing with a lone enemy was naturally not an issue. 3 of the 1,000 bull guards stabbed out with their spears at the same time, piercing the stomach of the sword slave. Just when the 3,000 ox sentinels thought that the sword slave was dead for sure, the sword slave didn't seem to feel any pain after his stomach was pierced. He continued to slash at the wooden neck of one of the 1,000 ox sentinels. A deep gash appeared on the wooden neck of the 1,000 ox sentinel. The 1,000 ox sentinel threw away the spear in his hand and tried to escape. However, the sword slave swiftly slashed at the 1,000 ox sentinel's wound. The second attack finally severed the 1,000 ox sentinel's neck. By the time the first 100 sword slave was dead, Lu Sheng had successfully exchanged the lives of 2,000 bull guards. However, the appearance of the 100 sword slave was just the beginning. According to the passive skill, as long as Gahan attacked, there would be a 5% chance of summoning a 100 sword slave. In other words, every 20 strikes would produce a 100 sword slave. Hence, Gohan chose to lower the attack power of each strike and increase his attack speed. Every second, he could swing his sword at the enemy 5 times, and every 4 seconds, he could summon a 100 sword slave. This was a terrifying summoning speed. In just a minute, 1,500 sword slaves were summoned. These 100 sword slaves had extraordinary swordsmanship. They did not fear death, nor did they feel pain. Moreover, they could automatically form a battle formation and fight. 3 minutes after the battle started, a team of 2,000 sword slaves gathered around Gohan. They protected the 1,000 bull guards on Gohan's left, right, and back, so that Gohan only needed to fight the enemies in front of him. Gohan was very terrifying without having to worry about the enemies behind him. His swordsmanship was like an impenetrable screen, blocking all attacks in front of him. He was like a high-speed chainsaw, constantly reaping the lives of the puppets. On the other hand, the 100 sword slaves weren't stingy with their lives. They used their bodies to block the attacks of the 1,000 ox guards, and then traded their lives for the lives of the 1,000 ox guards. Usually, a single 100 sword slave could kill 3,000 to 4,000 ox guards. What was even more terrifying was that once a 100 sword slave died, Gohan would summon a new 100 sword slave in a matter of seconds. This was an extremely shameless and terrifying method of fighting. The 1,000 ox guard, which consisted of over 1,000 soldiers, was forcefully whittled down by 500 or 600 under this method. If this continued, the entire 1,000 ox guard would be completely annihilated. This was the strength of the Royal Path Sword Maiden, Queen Yu, and also the reason why she was ranked 17th among the sword ranks. Not long ago, Kinzu's Queen Yu relied on constantly summoning 100 sword slaves to whittle away the enemy's health. Most of the time, the Queen Yu wouldn't even lose a lot of energy in a battle. As long as she relied on the 100 sword slaves to take damage and support her, she would be able to kill enemies that were much stronger than her. The reason the 1,000 bull guards wanted the emperor to kill Yang Guifei was because they didn't want the emperor to kill them in order to avenge Yang Guozhong. In essence, the 1,000 bull guards were afraid of death, which was why they rebelled against Li Longji. Since they had rebelled because they were afraid of death, the remaining 1,000 bull guards lost their will and confidence to continue fighting when they were faced with a 50% death rate and no hope of a successful rebellion. One of the 1,000 bull guards threw down his weapon and screamed in pain as he ran away from the stage. The escape of this 1,000 bull guards seemed to have triggered some sort of switch on the battlefield. The remaining 1,000 bull guards followed suit, throwing away their weapons and fleeing in panic. After all, running away was contagious. In the blink of an eye, the remaining 500 or so thousand bull guard soldiers had all fled, leaving only a single puppet standing in front of Gohan. This puppet was none other than the commander of the Thousand Bull Guard, Great General Chen Xuanli. I didn't expect His Majesty to be hiding such good martial arts. Chen Xuanli didn't look dejected when he saw his subordinates running away. Instead, he patted his hands lightly. Since His Majesty is so powerful, why don't you lead us to defend Chang'an City? That way, Yang Guozhong would still be His Majesty's good prime minister. Yang Yuan would still be His Majesty's woman. The Thousand Bull Guards would still be His Majesty's loyal dogs. And I, Chen Xuanli, might be able to die on the battlefield and live up to my passion. That's good too. Since I can't die at the hands of Enlu Shan, dying at the hands of His Majesty isn't a bad choice. Or, letting Chen Xuanli kill His Majesty isn't a bad choice either. As soon as Chen Xuanli finished speaking, he turned into a shooting star and charged towards Gahan. Protect the Emperor. 20 Bai West sword slaves instantly blocked in front of Gahan and used their bodies as Gahan's shield. Oomph! A bunch of trash. Chen Xuanli's spear trembled, and with a flourish, it instantly pierced the foreheads of 5 Bai West sword slaves, killing them instantly. Amazing. This was the first time Chen Xuanli had fully displayed his martial arts skills. He was indeed a very powerful opponent. It made Gahan's blood boil gradually. This person could be Gahan's opponent. After piercing through the 5 Bai West sword slaves at the front, the remaining Bai West sword slaves could no longer stop Chen Xuanli. However, this wasn't fatal. Gahan's Yu King's sword pointed forward and coincidentally touched the tip of Chen Xuanli's spear. Then, the two of them held each other's spear and sword for a few seconds. It was as if time had frozen. Gahan instantly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Then, his body was sent flying like a cannonball. What a powerful attack! Gahan struggled to get up from the ground. It wasn't that his swordsmanship was inferior to Chen Xuanli's, but his opponent's strength was simply too great. He had used brute force to send Gahan flying. Even more frightening was the fact that this attack had a penetrating effect. It directly passed through Gahan's shield and attacked Gahan's body. Gahan's internal organs trembled, and some of them even began bleeding. System notification. Player military governor. Your body has received 1,565 damage. This was a terrifying amount of damage. Gahan currently only had 4,000 HP. Chapter 184. Your Majesty, take this. Chen Xuanli's attack was successful, and his attack was like a tide, rushing towards Gahan. The tip of the spear was like a plum blossom, falling around Gahan, but Gahan didn't have time to appreciate these plum blossoms. On the contrary, if any of them fell on his body, Gahan would probably lose a lot of his shield energy. Fortunately, although his absolute strength was far lower than Chen Xuanli's, Gahan's agility was not something that Chen Xuanli could compare with, especially since Chen Xuanli's weapon was a spear. When it came to long-range combat and horse combat, the spear was naturally better than the sword. However, when it came to close combat, the spear became a hindrance to Chen Xuanli's performance. Gahan easily dodged Chen Xuanli's attacks, and then used his sword to chop down on Chen Xuanli's body. In terms of the battle, Gahan seemed to have the advantage, because no matter how he attacked, Chen Xuanli's spear couldn't touch Gahan's body, but Gahan could continuously break through Chen Xuanli's defense, allowing Yu King Gojian's sword to leave marks on his opponent's body. But in reality, Gahan was gradually falling into a disadvantage, and there were faint signs that he couldn't hold on any longer. Although the solid cold could attack Chen Xuanli's body, Chen Xuanli's puppet body was made of some unknown material. It was incomparably hard, more than 10 times harder than steel. Gahan's full-strength sword could even cut through white iron, but against Chen Xuanli's body, it could only leave a shallow mark. This kind of physical strength, Gahan had only seen on Dark Dragon King Zayoneda. And Zayoneda was a universe-level Yuan Ko. Based on this, Chen Xuanli was at least a nether-level Yuan Ko, or even a meteor-level Yuan Ko, which was equivalent to the peak of Spirit Sword level. Yu King Gojian's sword was only a famed sword maiden, so his talent was a bit lower than Chen Xuanli's. In addition, Guhan was not a famed sword-rank swordsman with 10,000 quarks of sword essence. He was only a treasure sword-rank swordsman with 4,000 quarks of sword essence. He could not display the full power of King Yu. If Guhan had 500,000 quarks of sword essence, then even 10 Chun Xuanli would not be enough to kill him. Chun Xuanli was a puppet, so he did not feel pain or anything else that could limit his combat power. Therefore, even though Chun Xuanli's body had been cut beyond recognition and there was not a single flat spot, it still did not affect his combat power. On the other hand, Guhan's stamina had been severely depleted after the intense battle. Compared to the start of the battle, Guhan's attack speed and movement speed had both decreased by 20%. If he continued to drop like this, Guhan wouldn't be able to dodge Chun Xuanli's spear. Finally, in a certain confrontation, when Guhan's attack was still ineffective, his body couldn't keep up with his thoughts. An opening appeared, and Chun Xuanli stabbed him in the waist. Guhan spat out another mouthful of blood. System notice. Player military governor. Your personal shield has received minus 2088 damage. System notice. Player military governor. Your body has received minus 1044 penetrating damage. The two consecutive system prompts announced that Guhan was in a very dangerous state. Guhan's personal shield had a total of 3,800 energy points. After being hit by Chun Xuanli, it had lost about half of its energy points. In addition, when he faced the 1,000 Bull Guard, he had also lost some energy points. As a result, Guhan's personal shield only had around 1,500 energy points. What was even more frightening was that each of Chun Xuanli's attacks had a penetrating effect. Looking at the damage, it seemed to be fixed at half of normal damage. At this moment, Guhan's health points were less than 1,000. Whether it was his personal shield or his own health points, neither could withstand another attack from Chun Xuanli. Looking at it from another perspective, Chun Xuanli's attacks might not be at the level of a Meteor Yuan Ko, but with the extremely disgusting penetrating effect, he was definitely at the level of a Meteor Yuan Ko. This was especially true for sword maidens who relied on the swordmaster's sword essence to stack their shields to a high level. Even if your shield had hundreds of thousands of energy points, such as Wondrous Pen Shadow Shield, which had more than 300,000 energy points, it wouldn't be of much use. The swordmaster's durability wouldn't be boosted by the swordmaster's sword essence. It would still be as high as it should be. When Chun Xuanli emptied the opponent's durability, the opponent's personal shield might still have more than 200,000 energy points left. Therefore, this puppet Chun Xuanli was definitely a very terrifying Yuan Ko. With his penetrating damage, he could restrain almost all the Confucian sword maidens who were famous for their shield energy. Among all the Meteor Yuan Ko, he was one of the strongest. Just like the top 10 sword maidens in the famed sword record, their strength could crush many sword maidens of the same level who were ranked at the bottom. As the wielder of the puppet Chun Xuanli, Liu Ban's strength must be terrifying as well. Guhan remembered that Liu Ban had once praised Guhan for being able to injure his 18 wooden generals. If Chun Xuanli was one of the 18 wooden generals, then Liu Ban actually had 18 Yuan Ko puppets as powerful as Chun Xuanli. It was a little too scary. Seeing Guhan spitting out another mouthful of blood, Chun Xuanli was no longer in a hurry to attack Guhan. Seeing that Guhan would not be able to withstand the next attack, Chun Xuanli did not rush to attack Guhan. It had to be known that Chun Xuanli was rebelling and killing the emperor. If he killed his majesty so easily, how could the future generations come up with all kinds of romantic and gay plots? Therefore, Chun Xuanli definitely didn't know the maxim that villains died because they talked too much. Your majesty, your swordsmanship is unparalleled, but your body is still too bad. Chun Xuanli sheathed his spear and put on a very haughty air. He said proudly, "But this is normal. Thinking about it, your majesty and imperial consort have long been hollowed out in the pure flowers palace. Their bodies have long since been hollowed out. It's reasonable that they can't beat this subject's body, which has been tempered day and night." Very good, very powerful. Guhan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stood up from the ground. He stared into Chun Xuanli's eyes and said with a smile, General Chen Xuanli. Do you know which sword this emperor holds in his hand? Chen Xuanli was stunned. He didn't know why Gahan would ask this question. He specially looked at the sword in Gahan's hand, then shook his head and said, "Apologies, Your Majesty. This official has placed his love for the spear. If Your Majesty takes out a spear, this official will definitely be able to tell its origin. But if it is a sword, forgive this official's incompetence, but I cannot guess which unparalleled divine sword Your Majesty holds." She's called King Yu Gojian's sword, the sword that King Yu used back then. Gohan explained very seriously. So it is King Yu's sword. But it is a pity that King Yu still had a chance to suffer and rise again after his defeat. But Your Majesty, you will not have this chance. Today, you will die under my spear. 1,000 years later, the world will remember me, Chen Xuanli, for killing the emperor. You are wrong, General Chen. The reason why this emperor told you that this emperor's sword is King Yu Gojian's sword is to tell you that you are dead meat. Just because of this sword. Chen Xuanli looked at the King Yu Gojian sword in Gohan's hand with disdain. Your Majesty, you are thinking too much. Do you really think that a piece of scrap metal passed down from ancient times can be of any use? Is only the later generations flattering them? Your Majesty, this official advises you to admit defeat. Perhaps this official can leave you with a whole corpse. You say this is a piece of scrap metal. Gahan laughed. Chen Xuanli, do you dare to take a blow from this emperor's sword? As long as you can take a blow from this emperor will announce to the world that you, Chen Xuanli, are innocent. The later generations will never harm you and will ensure your safety for the rest of your life. Chen Xuanli, do you dare to take a blow from this emperor? Chen Xuanli fell silent. Although he could kill Gahan, he could not kill an army loyal to the Tang dynasty. Moreover, he had no intention of betraying the Tang dynasty. He had dared to kill Yang Guozhong and Yang Yuhuan because he had conspired with Crown Prince Li Heng and obtained Li Heng's permission. Although Li Heng had hinted that he should kill Li Longji so that the Crown Prince could ascend to the throne, Chen Xuanli had never intended to kill Li Longji. This was because if he killed Li Longji, Li Heng would not say anything when he ascended to the throne. But after ascending to the throne and stabilizing his position, Li Heng would definitely make a move on Chen Xuanli to preserve Li Heng's good reputation as a benevolent father and filial son. What right did an emperor who could not avenge his father have to sit on the throne? However, because of all sorts of unforeseen events, Chen Xuanli was forced into a situation where he had to kill Gahan, Li Longji. If he could obtain Li Longji's promise that he would let bygones be bygones and that the later generations would not be able to kill him, that would naturally be excellent. But then again, how could this Li Longji possibly kill him with a single strike? This was a complete joke. After thinking it over, Chen Xuanli firmly nodded and said to Gahan, "Since this is His Majesty's imperial decree, Chen Xuanli does not dare to disobey." Chen Xuanli receives the decree. Long live His Majesty! Long live His Majesty! Chen Xuanli even pretended to kowtow to Gahan a few times, expressing that he was obeying Gahan's decree and had done all he could. Then he stood still and shouted, "Chen Xuanli, experience His Majesty's brilliant techniques. Good! We will let you experience the might of the sword of the Son of Heaven." Gahan waved the sword of the Yu King, and the remaining 12 sword slaves leaped back to Gahan's side. Gahan then raised the sword of the Yu King and made 3 deep cuts on his left arm, causing blood to flow. However, the blood did not flow to the ground. Instead, it floated in the air and turned into 8 new 100 Yu sword slaves. This was the advanced version of the sword of the Yu King, Slaughter of the Yu King. Consume 10% of the user's durability to immediately summon 3 sword slaves. No cooldown. Next, a skill that Chen Xuanli regretted showing off began channeling. Chapter 185. Gohan stood there with his sword in hand, and countless wisps of mist gushed out from the blade of the Yu King Gojian's sword and enveloped the sword slaves. In the next second, the eyes of the sword slaves lit up, and they suddenly raised their swords and stabbed them into their stomachs. Then, they didn't hesitate to cut open their stomachs and their intestines flowed out from their openings. What kind of freaking technique is this? Chun Xuanli had a bad feeling, but he still chose to keep his promise. He didn't think that the suicide of the sword slaves would cause him any great harm. As a result, Chun Xuanli regretted it. The blood of the sword slaves sprayed out from their stomachs like a fountain, and then all of it shot into the body of the Yu King Gojian sword. As the blood flowed into the sword, the color of the Yu King Gojian sword quickly turned blood red, and traces of neon aura emanated from both sides of the blade. When the blood of 20 sword slaves flowed into the Yu King Gojian sword, the Yu King Gojian sword seemed like a devil from hell. Chun Xuanli, take this. Guhan took a step forward, and then the tip of his sword slashed at Chun Xuanli's wooden neck. Chun Xuanli felt like a demonic claw from hell was grabbing at his neck. As long as Guhan's Yu King Gojian sword touched him, he would instantly be cut into two. No, I can't act cool anymore. At the brink of death, Chun Xuanli finally realized that standing there and letting Guhan slash at him was simply courting death. He immediately reneged on his promise, picked up his spear, and stabbed it at Guhan's Yu King Gojian sword. Chun Xuanli had a feeling that Guhan's strength would only last for this one attack. After this attack, Guhan would return to his previous state of being at his mercy. In the most dangerous moments of life, humans were the easiest to make breakthroughs and change. Chun Xuanli's spear attack could be said to be the peak of his life. He had never used such a powerful spear attack in his life. Even if the green lotus sword immortal was standing in front of him, he was confident that he could leave a hole in her body. Unless a deity descended to the mortal world, no one could dodge Chun Xuanli's spear. After using this spear, Chun Xuanli suddenly had an epiphany. He felt that his martial arts had reached a whole new level. Unfortunately, although Chun Xuanli had comprehended this at the last moment and used such a powerful spear strike, he had never expected that Guhan would have no intention of dodging a spear strike. Guhan had directly used his shoulder to receive Chun Xuanli's spear strike. The spear had indeed hit Guhan. Guhan's personal shield was instantly shattered. Then, the spear's tip stabbed into Guhan's shoulder, almost piercing through it. System prompt. Player Military Governor. Your personal shield has received minus 2,888 damage. Your personal shield has been shattered. Please pay attention to your safety and wait for your personal shield to reset before continuing the battle. System prompt. Player Military Governor. Your personal shield has received minus 1,444 damage. Your HP has fallen to a critical level. Please leave the battle immediately. System prompt. Player Military Governor. Your left arm has received devastating damage. You can no longer use your left arm. Please leave the battle immediately and use a medical capsule to heal your injured arm. 3 notifications in a row told Guhan that his current situation was extremely bad. If he were to receive another attack, he would really fall to the ground and die. However, Chun Xuanli no longer had the chance to use his spear a second time. At this moment, Guhan's Gojian sword had already reached his neck. 9 swords of mysterious heaven, sword of the vault of the heavens. Sparks suddenly flickered on the blood-red Gojian sword of the king of Yu. Soon afterwards, a huge wave of sword chi surged out of the sword. But this sword energy didn't scatter and kill enemies like the sword of the abyss. Instead, it wrapped around the king of Yu's Gojian sword, thickening and condensing. In the end, it became solid. When the sword aura finished condensing, the sword aura wrapped around the blade began to spin faster and faster. In the end, it was as fast as a speeding tire. This was the strongest killer move of a 9 swords of mysterious heaven, sword of the vault of the heavens. A large amount of sword aura wrapped around the weapon. Then, the sword aura began to spin crazily. It was like an indestructible drill that pierced the enemy's body and exploded, causing great damage. Under the combination of the sword Doqiong and the Yu King's Gojian sword, Chun Xuanli's neck, which had previously been indestructible and could only leave a shallow mark no matter how hard Guhan tried, was easily chopped off by Guhan in the next moment. It was as simple and easy as cutting a watermelon. Chen Xuanli's wooden eyes were filled with disbelief. Then he saw his wooden feet roll on the slanted stage. In the end, he didn't know where he had rolled to. Plop! Chen Xuanli's body fell to the ground. Gahan also fell to the ground due to a large loss of blood. When he opened his eyes again, he was back in the classroom. This was the second time he had returned to the classroom after passing out. When Gahan woke up again, he found that his arm had healed. Moreover, the crow that contained Lu Ban's soul flew in front of Gahan again. However, it didn't show Gahan any concern like the last time. "Junior, you're awake." Instead, he angrily scolded Gahan. "You stinking brat, you actually killed my 18 wooden generals." "My 18 wooden generals, without one of my 18 wooden men array, I would be at a loss. Those were all made from the peach wood of the Queen Mother of the West. Even if I wanted to make another one, it would be impossible," Lu Ban wailed as he scolded. It was obvious that he was in great pain over the death of his beloved. In pain, Lu Ban kept pecking at Gahan's head with the sharp beak of his crow to vent his dissatisfaction. "But Senior Lu Ban, you can't let me be killed by your beloved puppet." "Military Governor, I was just trying to protect myself." Gahan touched his head, which was hurting from the crow's pecking. This crow didn't seem to have much strength. He didn't expect it to hurt when it pecked. "Bullsh asterisk T, do you think my puppet would really kill you? It would let you come back after it knocked you out. I never had any intention of killing you. But you stinking brat, not only do you smell like MOD, you even kill my beloved doll. Tell me, how are you going to settle this debt?" "Military Governor is at your service, Mr. Lu Ban." Lu Ban was at least in Ian rank Yuan Ko. His strength was unfathomable. One Chen Xuanli puppet was enough to force Gahan to use his ultimate move. If he released two puppets like Chen Xuanli, Gahan would be dead for sure. Using the Sword Dipper Vault just now had consumed 4,000 sword essences from Gahan. Gahan's body was completely empty. Gahan didn't dare to disobey Lu Ban at this time. He had to listen to him. Although he looked like a warm and kind grandpa, unlike those crazy Yuan Ko who killed humans on sight, it was better to be obedient. Although Gahan hated Yuan Ko, it wasn't to the point where he would lose his mind. "You brat, if you have the ability, go to the Heavenly Court and get the trunk of a 5,000-year-old immortal peach tree from the Queen Mother of the West." Lu Ban snorted coldly. He didn't expect this brat, who was only a famed sword rank, to be able to steal a peach tree from a Heavenly Court. Sure, Gahan unexpectedly agreed without hesitation. Military Governor's lifelong wish is to destroy all the nests of Yuan Ko and kill them all in one fell swoop. The Military Governor, will go to the Heavenly Court sooner or later. At that time, let alone a 5,000-year-old immortal peach tree. Even if you want an entire peach garden, I will get it for you. "You brat, how can you be so arrogant?" The dark crow almost fell off the table when he heard Gahan's words. It wouldn't have mattered if someone else said this, but when it came from Gahan's mouth, the dark crow felt fear. "Brat, aren't you afraid that I'll kill you for saying this in front of me? I'm also Yuan Ko." The dark crow regained his footing. "Mr. Lu Ban has never done evil in this world. If Gahan sees you, I will definitely let you go. However, if Mr. kills humans in the future, the commander will definitely take Mr.'s head and offer it to the souls of humans in heaven." Gahan's words were very sincere. "Ha ha ha, interesting. Lu Ban was stunned for a moment before he laughed. "All right, in that case, I'll leave the important task of restoring the 18 wooden generals to you. Military Governor will definitely complete the task and steal that peach forest for you." Good. Lu Ban nodded. Then, Gahan heard a system notification. "Respected player, Military Governor, you have received the starting quest of the Genie level quest. Destroy the Celestial Court. Steal the peach tree. Would you like to accept this quest?" Gahan was shocked when he heard the words Emperor Sword Quest. He did not expect the starting quest of the Emperor Sword Quest to be hidden in this dungeon. If Gahan had not killed Chen Xuanli, who was almost impossible to kill, this quest would not have fallen into Gahan's hands. "Accept," Gahan replied without hesitation. System notification. Player, Military Governor, you have received the starting quest of the Genie level quest. destroy the celestial court, steal the peach tree. Quest objective: steal the trunk of the 5,000-year-old peach tree from the heavenly Queen Mother's peach garden in the celestial court. After completing the quest, you may enter the King Arthur's betrayal dungeon and look for Liu Ban to receive the quest reward and accept the next part of the quest. Special reminder: this quest cannot be abandoned or canceled. If the quest cannot be completed within 5 years, the quest will be declared a failure. Player, military governor, will forever lose the position of the 2 sword ladies and the sword lady and will never be able to obtain them again. Just when Guhan thought that the quest was over, he did not expect that in the next second, a broadcast would sweep through the entire game world. Broadcast to all channels. Player, military governor, has received the starting quest of the Genie level quest, Destroy the Celestial Court. A new chapter in the game is about to begin. Let us look forward to player, military governor, completing the quest and creating a new era. Chapter 186. All the players were shocked. Regardless of whether they were chatting, doing quests, doing instance dungeons, or flirting with sword ladies. In short, all the players were shocked by this broadcast. They stopped doing their quests and stared blankly. Some new players did not know what was going on and asked meekly, "What does the Genie level quest mean?" In the end, they did not get a reply from the people around them because everyone was shocked. After a dozen seconds, when everyone recovered from the shock, the entire world channel, private chat channel, and personal chat channel exploded. Everyone was discussing the Genie level quest in a frenzy. In the forum, posts about the military governor were instantly pushed to the top, pushing the Kanglin Wave's hidden dungeon post, which had only been at the top for a few hours, to the second place. This meant that in the hearts of the forum administrators, the Genie level quest was far more important than the hidden dungeon. This was because since the start of the game, there had been hidden dungeons every year, but there had not been more than 10 Genie level quests. Every Genie level quest meant that there's going to be a huge change. The first Genie level quest in the game was to officially release the token of an Emperor Sword Lady. This was to officially release the Emperor Sword Wielder level. The last Genie level quest was 25 years ago. After this quest was completed, the Fusang Celestial System in Sword Lady Online officially fell out with the Eastern Celestial World. They became independent from the Eastern Celestial World and formed the new Yuanko Celestial System, the Fusang Celestial System. They also released more than 10 sword ladies that belong to the Fusang Celestial System, as well as many Fusang Celestial System instance dungeons and crusade quests. They added many new tools and caused the entire game to enter a frenzy of farming Fusang Celestial System. Hence, every time an Emperor Sword level mission was activated, the players would receive many new experiences. It was equivalent to a brand new expansion pack. There would be new maps, tools, instance dungeons, and other new things. It was something that every player desired the most. It was a pity that there had been no news of a G&D level mission in the past 25 years. No one would have thought that at such a time, when everyone was focused on the hidden instance dungeon, there would be such a huge piece of news. The Waves of C post, which was originally getting thousands of comments per minute, quickly dropped 10 times in popularity. As for the thread about the opening of the G&D level mission, the number of discussions instantly increased by an astonishing 15,000 per minute. After that, Gohan's SMUF account, Military Governor 12580, left the top spot for 3 days. Then it was manually pushed back to the top spot by the popular players. The number of discussions also increased by a few hundred per minute. If it was not for the fact that one had to pay to enter the thread, the speed at which the number of discussions for this thread increased would be many times faster. As a result, Gohan's personal terminal started to receive a continuous stream of payment notifications. In order to thank Gohan for activating the G&D level mission, many rich players frantically rewarded Gohan. The speed at which Gohan's account balance increased was even faster than the speed at which the interview video was released. It was even crazier. Everyone was making guesses in the various threads. They wondered what this Emperor Sword level mission that Gohan had accepted represented and what new things would be added to this game. Then, someone revealed that the military governor should be fighting in the hidden instance dungeon. Could it be that the key NPC who accepted the mission was in this instance dungeon? In an instant, the discussion about the military governor's participation in the hidden instance dungeon became the hottest topic. People began to discuss whether the military governor, who was used to breaking big news, would be able to break the waves of C's invincibility this time. According to the military governor's habit of grabbing the headlines every day, this was definitely not impossible. Then, some people began to imagine all sorts of interesting stories about the waves of C's anus being broken. In short, these stories were all very unbearable. Then, he gave the clearers a death order. They had to take down the hidden instance dungeon before the military governor. Otherwise, they would be in trouble. Gahan did not know about any of this. As the instance dungeon isolated communication with the user's terminal, Guhan could not even receive the rewards that came rushing to him. The only way to communicate with the outside world in the instance dungeon was with some very special items. Such items were very rare. The Waves of C only had 2 of them, and naturally, the Yawang Sword faction did not have any. However, Gahan knew the value of the G&D level quest. He could imagine how the outside world would explode after hearing the broadcast. He could also imagine how his impression in the hearts of the players would become even more profound, and his position as the #1 internet celebrity would become even more solid. Gahan did not reject this kind of fame. On the contrary, he enjoyed it. Only an idiot would hide his name and broadcast to the entire instance dungeon. Ahem, Liu Ban coughed. Kid, since you have accepted this old man's quest, you must do everything you can to complete this quest for this old man. Don't slack off. Also, this old man has one last thing to ask you. Please answer truthfully. Senior, please ask. Gahan was a little puzzled. The last time old man Liu Ban asked him this question, Yuang had clearly returned to his normal state. However, now that Liu Ban had asked the last question, why were Yuang and Etion still in a state of silence? By the way, Guhan still remembered that Liu Ban's last question seemed to be about MOD. After asking that question, Liu Ban even gave Guhan a token of the Juzi sword. Guhan wondered if he would give it to Liu Ban again. Guhan was just thinking about it. Liu Ban most likely would not give it to Guhan. The system was not that stupid and generous. If it continued to give him a token of the Juzi sword, then wouldn't he be able to use this instance dungeon to grind out a set of the Juzi sword? No matter how he thought about it, this was not possible. Kid, this old man smells like that unfilial son on you. Let me ask you, what is your relationship with that MOD? Just as Gahan had guessed, Liu Ban asked about MOD again. MOD? I have nothing to do with him. Guhan repeated what he had said the first time, without changing a single word. Senior, are you talking about this thing? Then, Gahan took out a Juzi sword mechanical bird from his dimensional bag and gave it to Liu Ban for a closer look. This was a complete repeat of the first time. Although Gahan knew that it was impossible for Liu Ban to give him another token of the Juzi sword, he could not help but copy the template from the last time. I didn't expect it to really be that unfilial son of MOD. Liu Ban let out a long sigh. Fine, since we're fated to meet, I'll let you have it. What, you're really giving it to me? Seeing the originally lively dark crow stumble and fall on the table, Gahan could not believe his eyes. Junior, this old man will give you this Juzi sword mechanical bird. You're on your own. Don't disgrace the Gongshu family's name. Following the previous script, Liu Ban said nothing else after saying that. System prompt. You have discovered the Juzi sword mechanical bird. You are now an in-name disciple of the Gongshu family. You are free to pick it up. F*CK me. It's actually another token of the Juzi sword. Guhan did not know what to say. He had never thought that Liu Ban would actually give him another token of the Juzi sword. This way, Guhan would have a total of 7 tokens of the Juzi sword on him. Moreover, the 7 Juzi sword tokens were just a temporary number. If Gahan kept coming to this hidden instance dungeon, wouldn't that mean that Gahan would be able to obtain a Juzi sword token every time? Oh my god, this is too exaggerated. Guhan can get a complete set of the Juzi sword's keepsake without any effort. However, Gahan was not too happy. If it was so easy to obtain a full set of Juicy Sword tokens, the Juicy Sword would probably be no different from some trash sword mistress ranked at the bottom of the list. Thinking of that, Gahan completely lost interest in the Juicy Sword. If it was not a sword mistress ranked within the top 5, Gahan would not even bother to look at it. After Lu Ban left, the classroom suddenly fell silent. However, the silence was only temporary. Soon, a loud voice broke the silence. "Ugly Husky, hurry up and release me. I've had enough of being in the scabbard." Hearing Heavenly Yi's sharp voice, Gahan calmed down. It would appear that Lu Ban did not do anything to his sword mistress. He was just delaying the time to return it to him. All right. I will release you now." Gahan pulled out the heavenly sword that had returned to its scabbard from his back and released her. The moment the heavenly sword was released, it plopped down on Gahan's desk. The pure black lace panties beneath the blue muslin were clearly visible. Heavenly Yi's face was filled with displeasure. First, she poured a mouthful of wine into her mouth. Then, she slammed the table. "You ugly husky, are you telling me that this heroine is not beautiful at all? You actually allowed others to strangle me to death. Do you even think of this heroine as your sword mistress?" Heavenly Yi immediately lashed out at Gahan. It would appear that she was very concerned about Gahan's indifference in the beginning. "Didn't I save you?" Gahan sighed. "For you, I even suffered a serious injury. What are you dissatisfied about?" You're clearly looking down on me. This heroine begged you for a whole 5 minutes. My neck was already hurting from being strangled, yet you didn't even look at me. Tell me, why is that? It's very simple." Gahan raised his head and looked into Heavenly Yi's eyes. "Heavenly Yi, I don't like you. You're not worth me losing 40 points. Heavenly Yi was dumbfounded. "Ha ha!" King Yu laughed maniacally through the scabbard. It was as if he was going crazy. Chapter 187. Itian didn't feel good at all. She personally heard her sword wielder say that he didn't like her. No sword mistress would like such a feeling, even though Itian had already made it clear to Gahan that she didn't like Gahan either. Women are all like this. It's natural for me to hate you, but how can you hate me? This doesn't make sense. I'm a beauty. I want to go on strike. Itian slammed her fist on the table. Even if you use force to order me, if I choose to work and not put in any effort, don't even think about getting any benefits from me. Hence, Itian started to threaten Gahan. Unfortunately, Gahan didn't fall for it. He calmly raised his head and looked into Itian's eyes. "You can't threaten me. First, your swordsmanship is inferior to mine, so I can choose to use your sword form to fight for the rest of my life. It doesn't matter to me. Second, I can go to the auction house and buy a bottle of treasure sword-grade nectar at any time. It won't cost much. Itian, I don't like to be threatened. If you dare to threaten me again, I'll immediately cancel my synchronization with you. This fragment of your consciousness will also completely dissipate, and you won't be able to go back. Are you sure you want to continue threatening me?" Gahan's words made Itian's hair stand on end. She wanted to refute and say a few harsh words, but in the end, she couldn't say a single word. Because from Gahan's tone, Itian could tell that Gahan would really do it. He wouldn't hesitate to cut off his sword mark and replace it with a treasure sword-grade sword mistress. He would only lose a portion of the upper limit of his sword essence. For Gahan, this was a completely bearable loss. But for Itian, this was a fact that she couldn't bear. Itian was no longer the sword mistress who didn't want to become Gahan's sword mistress just because he was ugly. She was no longer the sword mistress who didn't care about survival. After enjoying the pleasures of the world for 2 days, how could she be willing to dissipate her consciousness and return to eternal sleep? So, Itian, who originally intended to threaten Gahan, was instead threatened by a single sentence from Gahan. It had to be said that this was a very ironic matter. "Just you wait. Ugly husky." Itian suddenly tapped Gahan's head in a flirtatious manner, and then said coquettishly, "I'll make you fall in love with me one day. Then, at that time, I will kick you down again." After saying that, Itian gently twisted her buttocks, causing her underwear to burst out from under her skirt, and then quickly hid it back. This scene was so beautiful that any man who saw it couldn't help but be moved. Unfortunately, Gahan didn't have any reaction to this. Etion's style changed too quickly. Gahan expressed that he simply could not keep up with Etion's rhythm. So, Gahan could only shut his mouth and not make any comments. Hey, Husky, what was that last move you used to deal with Qin Xuanli just now? Why do I feel that the power of your last move has already broken through the scope of a spiritual sword? Even the power of an immortal sword is only SOSO. Etion got down from the table, but she found a stool and sat next to Gahan. Her body pressed tightly against Gahan, and the fragrance of her body mixed with the fragrance of wine permeated around Gahan. Etion seemed to be asking this question to Gahan, but in reality, she was holding onto one of Gahan's arms as she asked the question. Fortunately, Etion still had a certain level of integrity, so she didn't rub Gahan's arm against her chest. Etion was indeed a heroine who would do what she said. Her actions were swift and decisive. This is King Yu's ultimate move. Gahan calmly enjoyed the joy of the beauty's embrace. King Yu's ultimate move is to kill all the hounds after the hares are dead, sacrificing all the sword slaves. Not only can each sword slave recover 3% of their durability, but they can also increase the damage of their next attack by 30%. During the battle just now, that puppet was too careless, so I sacrificed all 20 sword slaves to King Yu's ultimate move very smoothly. Coupled with my 9 swords of mysterious heaven, the power is naturally astonishing. That's not right. Etion's reaction was very fast, and she immediately raised a question. Even if you sacrificed all 20 sword slaves, it would only increase to 600%, right? With your pitiful sword essence, let alone 600%. Even if King Yu's Gojian sword was increased by 6,000%, that would only be 60 times. That would at most be a spiritual sword attack. How could it reach the level of an immortal sword attack? This is impossible. Of course it's impossible for 6,000%. Gahan smiled. But what if it's 19,000%? 19,000%? Hearing Gahan's words, Etion was so shocked that she jumped out of her chair. 19,000% was 190 times the attack. How is that possible? King Yu's ultimate move could actually increase the attack by 190 times. Was there any justice in this world? How is he going to let anyone live? What's impossible about it? This is because these 20-30% increments aren't calculated using addition. In reality, this 30% is calculated using multiplication. If I were to make a formula, it would be 1. 3 to the 20th power. Using a calculator, 190. 0496 377488077994388801. If I were to round it up, it would be 100 million. Etion was speechless. Now that he thought about it, it was indeed 190 times. Then she heard Gahan say, actually 190 times the attack isn't at the level of an immortal sword attack. After all, my sword essence is too low, only 4,000 quarks. But with my mysterious Heaven 9 Heaven Sword Dipper Vault, it's different. This is my strongest single target killing move. It can deal about 10 times the damage of a normal attack under the same circumstances. You can imagine how terrifying King Yu's attack was. Below immortal sword level, almost no one can take my attack. Gahan's words were extremely arrogant. As a treasured sword wielder, he actually claimed that no one below immortal sword level could take his attack. Yuan Ko. Etion opened her mouth to retort, but she couldn't say anything. Because just now, Qin Xuanli was indeed equivalent to a peak spirit sword level meteor level Yuan Ko, and he really couldn't take Gahan's attack before dying. From the looks of it, Gahan really wasn't bragging. Could it be that Gahan was invincible below immortal sword level? Of course not. Thinking about it, Gahan couldn't be invincible below immortal sword level just because of this attack. This was because there were too many requirements for this attack. First, he needed to accumulate enough sword slaves to deal damage. Secondly, he needed to be undisturbed during the sword slave blood sacrifice. Secondly, Gahan's attack had to hit the enemy. Gahan only had one chance to attack. If he failed, he would be completely useless. Now that he understood this, it was easy to deal with Gahan. First, he had to kill as many sword slaves as possible so that Gahan wouldn't be able to gather enough sword slaves. Moreover, he could ambush Gahan while the sword servant was committing suicide, which could also interrupt the skill. Finally, as long as one's movement technique was good enough, they could hide for more than 10 seconds, and the cooldown of the ultimate skill would automatically disappear. Normally, the king of Yu, Go Jinjin's playstyle was to have his teammates at the front, giving Guhan time to accumulate sword slaves and accumulate skills. Then, he would have the time and space to deal a killing blow. It was a tactic that relied on the protection of his teammates to deal high damage. Chun Xuanli had stood still and allowed Guhan to slash Yuan Ko to death with a single slash. This was truly rare. While they were talking, the rest of their teammates gradually appeared in the classroom. When they saw Tian sitting beside Guhan warmly and thoughtfully, they couldn't help but look at each other. Didn't this pair of sword wielder and sword lady look at each other with displeasure just a moment ago? How did they become so intimate in the blink of an eye? After the players returned, Lu Ban once again came out to announce the results of each player. Ahem, I'll announce the results now. We'll start with the lowest score. First, student Gangshan, who came in last. Mathematics, you answer the first, third, and seventh multiple choice questions correctly. All the easy questions were wrong. Total score, 30 points. Gangshan lowered his head in shame when he heard his own results. He had scored 40 points in the previous test, but this time he only scored 30 points. Tied for fourth place, you. Physics multiple choice questions. You answer the first, second, sixth, seventh, and eighth questions correctly. Tied for fourth place, you Sikong, geography, multiple choice questions correctly. You answer the first, second, sixth, seventh, and eighth questions correctly. Total score, 50 points. These two siblings had completely replicated the results of the previous test. Even the correct questions were exactly the same. Everyone couldn't help but admire them. To be able to do this, they were definitely top students. Third place, Hong Yu, politics, multiple choice questions correctly. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and ninth questions correctly. Total score, 80 points. This time, Hong Yu scored 80 points, which was 10 points more than the previous test. It was just enough to make up for the 10 points that Gangshan had lost. With Hong Yu's position, the team's current score should be exactly the same as the previous test. Second place, Magic Pen, Lansong River, language, multiple choice questions correctly. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth questions correctly. Total score, 110 points. Compared to the previous test, Magic Pen had lost 1 point and was now in second place. This was because Magic Pen had answered the last short answer question correctly. This time, it was the second to last short answer question. The last question was worth 40 points, which was 10 points more than the second to last question. Since Magic Pen was in second place, it meant that this time, Gohan had obtained first place. First place, military governor, history, multiple choice questions correctly. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth questions correctly. Total score, 8 points. Ninth on the short answer question. All the answers are correct. Total score is 150 points. Unexpectedly, Gahan had obtained a full score. This was probably the first full score since the appearance of this dungeon. Ahem, your total score in the college entrance examination is 470 points. Congratulations on reaching the minimum score for the second level. You will pass a slightly more difficult test. After Lu Ban finished speaking, everyone thought that they were about to enter the next battlefield. However, Lu Ban suddenly added, "By the way, one of you has obtained a full score of 150 points in the 3 main subjects. In that case, you will receive a small reward from me, Lu Ban." After saying that, the ceiling of the classroom opened. Then, a small brocade bag fell from the ceiling and landed in Gahan's palm. Chapter 188. First place, Long Yu, language, multiple choice questions, first, second, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, all correct, 8. Short answer questions, ninth, all correct, total score of 140 points. A few dozen minutes later, the Surging Waves team also completed the college entrance exam and received their scores. However, the first place Long Yu made a mistake on a multiple choice question, so he didn't get the full score of 150 points. His score wasn't as high as Gahan's. However, the other team members' scores were very high. Basically, all of them scored above 80 points. In total, they had a total of 570 points, which was the minimum score for this dungeon. They only needed to pass the simple test to be able to pass. However, none of them had the token of the Juzi sword on them, so it was even more impossible for them to receive the token of the Juzi sword as a reward. Because none of them got the full score, they naturally didn't receive the extra reward from Luban. Don't look down on the reward of the Juzi sword. This was an extremely important item, a precious item that could decide the direction of this instance. When the Surging Waves team finished their exam, Gahan and the others had also finished the second exam. Compared to the third book's All Black Night Vortex and Night Witch combination, the second book score was much easier. The opponent was a force called the Capture Barracks. They had a total of 100 soldiers who were proficient in battle formations and didn't fear death. Under the leadership of their general, they directly attacked Gahan's team. The Capture Barracks was one of the most terrifying forces in the Martyr's Palace. It was said that for every 10 soldiers in the Capture Barracks, their combat strength would double. A 10-man Capture Barracks couldn't even beat an ordinary ancient sword-rank swordsman. But a group of 50 people could sweep away a treasure sword-rank swordsman team. 100 people could even make a famed sword-rank swordsman team feel very strained. With 300 people together, any spirit sword-level swordsman would not be their opponent. If the total number reached 700 people, they would be able to fight against the 3 eternity-level Yuan Ko, Martial Sage Guan Yunchang, Hung Ho Zhang Ida, and Ren Wang Lu Xuanda. These 3 were among the strongest fighters in the Martyr's Palace. Hung Marquis Zhang Ida was one of the 72 dukes. Ren Marquis Lu Xuanda was one of the 10 kings, and Martial Sage Guan Yunchang was even more powerful. He was one of the 6 sages of the Martyr's Palace, and each one of them could fight an immortal sword-tier swordsman to a standstill. These 3 combined were actually able to fight to a draw with the 700 members of the capture camp. From this, one could see just how powerful the capture camp was. Fortunately, there were only 100 soldiers from the capture barracks here. Moreover, the corps commander of the capture barracks, Gao Shun, was not present. Although 100 people from the capture barracks would be very troublesome to deal with, Gahan's team was different. This was a team made up of the strongest people in the famed sword tier. Dealing with the capture barracks would only require a bit of time. However, after the battle ended, Gahan had to admit that the capture barracks was indeed a very frightening military force. Layers upon layers of formations, all kinds of exquisite coordination, and their movements were unified and orderly. Every order was executed without fail. 100 people were like one person. Most importantly, the power of the soldiers from the capture barracks could be transferred to each other, merging as one. Every attack from a soldier from the capture barracks was like 100 soldiers from the capture barracks attacking Gahan at the same time. The damage caused was very considerable. If not for the fact that their side strength was in a state of complete suppression, they really might have been overturned by the attack of the capture barracks. After expending a lot of effort to deal with the capture barracks, Gahan and the others finally entered the Dimensional Temple. Once again, they saw the bound Artoria on the high platform of the temple. Once again, they saw the pure white wedding dress and the alluring buttocks. All right, Gahan's focus was on the wrong place. Next, they needed to deal with the dimensional turbulence on the dimensional altar. The last time they dealt with the dimensional turbulence, it was because Hong Yu and the team's coordination was not good enough that they failed to break the formation. If not for Gahan's timely actions, Wondrous Pen and Hong Yu would have fallen under the attack of the dimensional turbulence. Thus, yesterday, Wondrous Pen, who had already thought of this point, dragged Hong Yu along to train for an entire day. It was all to practice their teamwork in breaking the formation. As expected, this time, breaking the formation was very smooth. From start to finish, there were no accidents. The dimensional turbulence on the entire dimensional altar was successfully removed. Of course, following this, Gahan and the others did not go to save Artoria. Instead, they gradually gathered together and waited for Old Man Merlin to appear. If they did not obtain the scroll to remove Artoria's bindings from Old Man Merlin, they would not be able to save Artoria. Those who come from afar are guests. Welcome to the dimensional altar, a leisurely voice said faintly. Immediately, Merlin appeared in front of Guhan and the others. I am Merlin. Thank you for your hard work. This Merlin spoke first. It seems that we don't have to fight this time. Yu Sikong whispered to her sister. Originally, Merlin would not speak after appearing and would directly attack. However, because they passed through the middle last time, Merlin did not fight and directly handed the magic removal scroll to Gahan and the others. Therefore, when Yu Sikong saw that Merlin still did not directly attack this time and instead started chatting, she guessed that they would not have to fight again. Sure enough, Merlin continued. Juniors, you must be here to save Artoria. It's rare that Coyote escaped and found you. It was not in vain that I helped him lure the 3 kings away. Senior Merlin is also Coyote's friend? Gohan's eyes turned to Merlin and asked. No, I'm not Coyote's friend. That brat. How can he be worthy of being my friend? Merlin laughed disdainfully. I'm just Artoria's teacher. I'm her best friend and teacher. As long as Artoria is well, I'll be satisfied. Senior Merlin, since you have the intention to release Lady Artoria, why didn't you do it yourself and release her? Instead, you waited for us to come? Gohan asked. It's simple. I can't release her. Merlin sighed and pointed to his chest. Dear, I'm already a filthy person. I can't go against the filthy will, so I can't release Artoria. But you can. You haven't been infected by filth. Only you can save her. Take it. Merlin threw the magic removal scroll to Gahan. This is the only way to remove the binding magic on Artoria. Once you save Artoria, leave quickly. Thank you. Gohan took the scroll from Merlin and rushed to the dimensional altar himself. He used the scroll to free Artoria and held her in his arms. Seeing that Artoria had been successfully rescued, a smile finally appeared on Merlin's face. He waved at Artoria. Go, go. Don't ever come back here, pure Artoria. May you find your destiny in the future. With that, Merlin turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared without a trace. No one knew where he went. Let's go too. Gohan looked at Artoria in his arms and said to his teammates, we should go find Coyote now. At the moment when Gohan left the Dimensional Temple with Artoria, Dragon Feather also led his team into the Dimensional Temple in another instance dungeon. Originally, Gohan's team was ahead of Dragon Feather by dozens of minutes. However, Gohan's team had spent a lot of time dealing with the rank-breaking camp. On the other hand, Dragon Feather's team only needed to deal with the weak dragon-level Yuan Ko of the Chuanjin 7 in a matter of minutes. They were faster than Gahan by dozens of minutes, so they were able to catch up with Gahan's team. However, unlike Gahan, Munyan, who was in Dragon Feather's team, was carrying Coyote on his back. After obtaining detailed information about the Hung Mountain Sword Sect, Dragon Feather's team naturally knew how to break the dimensional array. However, unlike Wondrous Pin and the others who had practiced for a long time, this was Dragon Feather's team's first time breaking the dimensional array. In theory, there was a high chance that they would fail due to a lack of coordination. Dragon Feather also knew this, so he was prepared. Dragon Feather drew a black, oddly shaped sword that looked like a devil. He stabbed the sword into the top of his head. The entire sword sank into Dragon Feather's body. Then, 5 black shadows that looked like tentacles flew out from the sides of Dragon Feather's head and pierced into the bodies of his 5 teammates. Don't resist. Accept the control of my soul-mastering demon hand, Dragon Feather said to his teammates. Soul-mastering demon hand was the ultimate move of Dragon Feather's treasure sword, the Sword Lady's soul-mastering demon sword. Through the soul-mastering demon hand, one could control one's teammates or enemies. Controlling an enemy was very troublesome. One had to reduce the enemy's health to less than half before there was a certain chance of success. In principle, the higher the sword element value, the higher the chance of success. Compared to controlling an enemy, it was much more convenient for the soul-mastering demon sword to control his teammates. As long as his teammates let go of their resistance, he could easily control their bodies and do whatever he wanted. This was Dragon Feather's killer move against the dimensional array. Since 5 people could easily cause problems when they worked together, then one person could control 5 people. This way, there would definitely be no problem. The few masters in the virtual list of famous swords looked at each other. Although they were very unwilling to be controlled by Dragon Feather, they had no choice but to let go of their minds and accept the soul-mastering demon hand's control of their bodies. Under the control of the soul-mastering demon hand, Dragon Feather smoothly controlled his teammates and completed the work of breaking the dimensional array. Merlin also appeared soon after. His line was the same as what he had said to Gahan just now. He said that he could give the binding removal scroll to Dragon Feather. Just as Dragon Feather took the binding removal scroll from Merlin and was about to rescue Artoria, Coyote, who had been unconscious all this while, suddenly struggled to stand up. "You can't use it. Cough, cough. You can't use that scroll." Coyote hugged Dragon Feather's waist and looked at Dragon Feather anxiously. "This scroll is filthy. You can't let it touch Artoria." Wow. The plot had been reversed in an instant. In another instance dungeon, Gahan had already left Terminal T2 with Artoria, who had used the binding removal scroll. Nothing could be changed now. Chapter 189. Interesting. Hearing Coyote's words, Longyu smiled as he played with the scroll in his hand. Things were indeed as fishy as he had guessed. Bringing Coyote into the dimensional altar was indeed the right choice. "Captain, you've already guessed that the scroll is fake, right?" Team member Shuel Leixing asked in the team channel. "Yes, I've guessed a little," Longyu said with some pride. "I've carefully read the information of the Hung Mountain Sword Sect and found that in the battles with Merlin, no matter what the situation was, the Hung Mountain Sword Sect always won. They always beat Merlin away and obtained the magic dispelling scroll that Merlin left behind. Merlin is a very powerful Yuan Ko. Every time, he can fight with the Hung Mountain Sword Sect's team for dozens of minutes. He only won when the Hung Mountain Sword Sect's sword essences were almost exhausted and their shields were almost destroyed. It was precisely because of this powerful Yuan Yen. In the Hung Mountain Sword Sect's first few battles, their team wasn't familiar with Merlin's magic. As a result, 4 of their personal shield were destroyed at the start of the battle. But even so, the Hung Mountain Sword Sect still won. Similarly, when his sword essence was exhausted and his protective shield was basically destroyed, he inexplicably injured Merlin, and then Merlin retreated. The duration of those few battles was actually faster than the battles that he had familiarized himself with Merlin's skills. Don't you think this is too illogical? It seems that Merlin lost on purpose. He pretended to fight with all his strength and was accidentally injured. He deliberately left the magic dispelling scroll behind. That's why I suspect that there's a big problem with this magic dispelling scroll, but I'm not sure, so I asked you to bring Coyote in. I think that in this game, only Coyote can determine whether the magic dispelling scroll is real or fake. The key to dispelling the mission is also Coyote. Longyu's series of explanations instantly made all of his teammates feel a sense of worship and respect. This person's thinking and wisdom were too strong. As expected of the old military advisor's last disciple, he was really too smart. If he wanted to trick someone, that person probably wouldn't even know who tricked him. Just as the rest of the team was filled with admiration for Longyu, on the other side, Coyote, who was struggling to stand up, glared at Merlin furiously. "You didn't expect this, did you? Merlin, Coyote, didn't die but lived until now. You didn't expect this, did you? I really didn't expect you to be alive." When Merlin saw the Coyote getting up, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, but he still maintained a smile on his face. "Coyote, I'm glad that you're alive. Things aren't what you think. I'm really helping Artoria." "Help?" From the moment Suda appeared, I knew that you were the mastermind behind the scenes. Merlin, Artoria and I trusted you so much. Why did you betray us? Why? Coyote roared at the top of his lungs. Merlin finally could not maintain the smile on his face, but it was tinged with embarrassment. Silly boy, I, Merlin, didn't betray Artoria. This matter isn't something a silly boy like you can figure out. All right, since you didn't betray Artoria, why did you? Why did you give this filthy scroll to these human sword-bearers so that they could save Artoria? It's impossible that you didn't know that this scroll would cause Artoria to fall back into the control of filth. Coyote scolded. The effect of this scroll isn't something a fool like you who can't even score 50 points in the magic exam can understand. Faced with Coyote's interrogation, Merlin could only use these powerless words to refute. Human, believe me, this scroll won't harm Artoria at all. Only it can help Artoria. Merlin did not intend to continue arguing with Coyote, so he directly said this to Long Yu in an attempt to convince him. Long Yu was completely indifferent to this. He looked at Merlin as if he had seen through everything, indicating that he had seen through Merlin's disguise. Merlin still wanted to say something, but suddenly his face turned bitter. With a helpless expression, he said, I don't have time. Then, he quickly turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared without a trace. This despicable traitor. Seeing Merlin escape, Coyote stomped his feet in frustration and anger. However, no matter how frustrated and angry he was, it was useless because Merlin had already escaped. Mr. Coyote, please hold your anger for a moment. The matter at hand is more important. Long Yu patted Coyote's shoulder comfortingly. Mr. Coyote, the most important thing right now is to save Artoria. Since this magic binding scroll is fake, how should we save Artoria? That's right, that is indeed the most important thing right now. I was too anxious. Coyote sighed, but soon became excited again. He said to Long Yu, actually, the binding magic on Artoria comes from the power of the entire dimensional altar. The Martyr's Palace has set up a magic array in the entire dimensional altar, concentrating the power of the entire magic array to bind Artoria. As long as this magic array is broken, Artoria can naturally be saved. As he spoke, Coyote raised his right hand and pointed at a sword inserted very high above the dimensional altar. That's the core of this magic array. As long as you pull out this sword, the magic array will collapse on itself. However, you have to be careful when you play with it. That sword is very powerful, and anyone who touches it will suffer a backlash. The stronger the person who touches it, the greater the backlash. It's best to let an ordinary person pick it up. That way, the backlash can be reduced to the lowest level. Only ordinary people can touch it. Dragon Feather began to bite his knuckles again. Everyone here, including Ardwolf, was a freakishly powerful person. Where could he find an ordinary person to remove the sword? What kind of backlash will this sword cause? Long Yu really could not think of where to find an ordinary person, so he could only think of a way to endure the backlash. The system would not give him an unsolvable problem. It will seal the power of the person who touches it. Coyote replied, unless it's a flood grade or desolate grade Yuan Ko, all the sword wielder or Yuan Ko below the flood grade will have their power sealed. Furthermore, it's a seal that lasts for a long time. Even if you throw the sword away on the spot, the power of the person who touches it will be sealed for more than a month. Because of this, none of us dared to take the sword. I understand. Long Yu continued to bite his knuckles. He was calculating the benefits. He could send an ancient sword wielder to remove the sword. This way, he would only lose the combat power of an ancient sword wielder. No matter how he thought about it, losing such a small amount of combat power was acceptable to his team. Long Yu turned his attention back to Munyon. He still planned to give this unlucky mission to him. He was the weakest member of the team, and he had the least value. However, when the words reached his mouth, Long Yu hesitated. It was not that the loss of an ancient sword wielder was too great. After all, this was a dungeon. After leaving the dungeon, all attributes would be reset, and the sealed ancient sword wielder would instantly return to their normal state. It was not a big loss. After all, in the final battle, losing an ancient sword wielder was not a big deal. Long Yu hesitated because he knew that he had already given Munyon a bad mission. If he gave him another mission that would cost him a lot, he was afraid that Munyon would have a falling out with him. At their level, there were very few things that they could fight over. The only two things that they had to protect were face and fairness. If Long Yu made Munyon a scapegoat twice in a row, then Munyon would lose face. In a fit of anger, it would be normal for him to have a falling out. Even though Munyon was the weakest in the Great Blue Waves raid team, his father was an important figure. If Long Yu wanted to obtain more resources in the Deep Waves team in the future, he would need Munyon's father's support. If he really fell out with Munyon, many of Long Yu's plans would be hindered. This was not something he wanted to see. After thinking it over, Long Yu decided that he would bear this loss himself. He would send his own ancient sword wielder to retrieve the sword. Moreover, by setting an example, he would be able to solidify his reputation and earn the goodwill of his teammates. This would pave the way for the future. Purple Myrtle, go and retrieve that sword for me. Long Yu put away his demon soul sword, then released his ancient sword wielder, the Purple Myrtle flexible sword. Long Yu had awkwardly called the Purple Myrtle flexible sword Purple Myrtle, instead of directly calling it Purple Myrtle flexible sword. Apart from the Purple Myrtle flexible sword, there was also the Purple Myrtle magic sword and the Purple Myrtle imperial sword. The former was a spirit sword, while the latter was an immortal sword. How could the Purple Myrtle flexible sword dare to compete with these two for the name Purple Myrtle? It could only be called Purple Myrtle. Back to the topic at hand. The sword had been inserted very high up, and there was no place for it to use as leverage. As such, the Purple Myrtle flexible sword could not reach the sword by itself. As such, Long Yu ordered Graceful Lady, "Graceful Lady, release your floating nether sword and help Purple Myrtle get up." The floating nether sword was Graceful Lady's treasured sword wielder. It had the ability to levitate. If no one interfered, it could fly up to a height of 200 meters. It was one of the few treasured swords that could levitate. That's right, the ancient sword wielder, the Skywalker sword, also had the ability to levitate. However, the Skywalker sword's ability to levitate was only 5 meters, which was far inferior to the floating nether sword. Under the floating nether sword's embrace, the Purple Myrtle flexible successfully flew to the location of the treasured sword. Long Yu, this isn't a treasured sword. Suddenly, the airborne Purple Myrtle flexible sword said to Long Yu, "There's only a scabbard here." "Ardwolf, my wielder said that there's only a scabbard there. What's going on?" Long Yu asked curiously. "I'm not sure either. The sword and scabbard were originally there." Ardwolf shook his head, indicating that he did not know what was going on. "Forget it, Purple Myrtle flexible sword, pull out the scabbard." Under Long Yu's command, Purple Myrtle flexible sword finally pulled out the scabbard. The moment the scabbard was pulled out, the bound Artoria's body flashed with light. She was released from her restraints and fell to the ground. At the same time, Purple Myrtle flexible sword, which was high up in the sky, let out a blood-curdling scream and returned to its sword form, falling to the ground as well. However, what Long Yu did not expect was that even the floating nether sword, which had carried Purple Myrtle flexible sword up into the sky, was affected and returned to its sword form. After being appraised by its wielder, Graceful Lady, the floating nether sword was also sealed. In this way, the Great Storm of Azure Wave's team had already lost 2 sword wielder members. Chapter 190. Sectmaster, this is the latest news from Long Yu. They have already solved the plot of Artoria's corruption. They will have no problem breaking through 60%. In the Sectmaster's office in the Kangland Billows, the CEO of the vast expanse hall personally handed the information from the dungeon to Jin, so that's how it is. The design of this dungeon is not bad. It's much more interesting than the dungeons we've tackled in the past. It seems like Bat's IQ and EQ have increased by quite a bit. Those old fogies from the Lunian clan have really put in a lot of effort. I wonder if this will be a good thing or a bad thing. Jin said in a clear voice. It seemed like she knew quite a bit about the secrets behind Sword Maiden Online. This was not surprising. After all, The relationship between Jindy and the Lunyan clan was so close that they almost wore pants together. It was not difficult for her to know these secrets, especially after Gu Jin became Jindy. According to the Jindy Convention, the Sword Committee had released all the confidential documents to Gu Jin. Many of them were about the secrets behind Bat and Sword Maiden Online when the Lunyan clan was building it. Forget it. Those are matters for the Sword Committee and the Lunyan clan to worry about. Uncle Bai Yun, your disciple did well this time. I think he's already half as good as you. He could take over your position. Hee, Long Yu may be smart, but he's still lacking if he wants to be half as good as me, young Master Bai Yun. He's already been bewitched by some superficial things. I think he's already on the wrong path in this dungeon. The CEO of the vast expanse hall was called young Master Bai Yun. Back then, he was a greenhorn who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Now, he had become a cunning old fox. Uncle Bai Yun, are you saying that Dragon Feather's strategy this time has already gone astray? Jen was stunned for a moment. She carefully looked at the mission report again. But there's nothing strange here. Sect leader, you are, after all, a little young. You're not like us old men who have seen too many conspiracies. In the entire world, I am afraid that only those old things and I can see through the twists and turns of this. After young Master Bai Yun finished speaking, he whispered into Jin's ears. Jin's eyes widened. It took him a while to digest what young Master Bai Yun said. I didn't expect there to be so many things here. If it wasn't for Uncle Yakumo's reminder, I wouldn't have been able to understand them. You can't blame Long Yu. He is indeed too young. Young Master Bai Yun nodded, the wrinkles on his old face twisting together as he smiled. Sect Master, please forgive me. This time I won't mention that boy Long Yu. Let him suffer a bit more and comprehend it himself. Sure. Eugen knocked on the table. However, if Dragon Feather stays here for too long and doesn't discover the problem, it would be terrible if someone else gets there first. Sect leader, you don't have to worry about this. Yakumo said that other than those old men who have fought with me my whole life, no one would be able to see the problem. What if it's that person called military governor? Suddenly, Ojino mentioned the military governor's name. She projected a web page into the air. Upon closer inspection, it was the Emperor's Sword level mission that had been pushed up. According to our information, when this military governor triggered the mission, he should have been in the instance dungeon. However, he was the only one who triggered the Emperor's Sword level mission. Long Yu and the rest did not even discover any clues about the mission. From this, it can be seen that this military governor is also an extraordinary person. If he also discovered this, wouldn't he be ahead of us? Sect leader, please let us pass. This military governor is just a young man. He might grow to my level in the future, but for now, he is not worth mentioning. Young Master Bai Yun smiled disdainfully. It was obvious that he did not take Gahan seriously. That's not necessarily true. When father was young, wasn't he just as famous as this military governor? Moreover, it seems that when father was around the same age as this military governor, he also received the genie level mission. Uncle Bai Yun should know this very well. Yes, but when Sir Jindy was young, he was an unparalleled genius. Even 10 military governors added together could not compare to Sir Jindy. As Wushuang Bai Yun spoke, the wrinkles on his face were filled with memories. No matter what, this military governor is a talent. If the Stormy Seas wants to stand at the peak of the game, we must continuously absorb talents like him. I will get someone from the Billowing Sea Hall to invite the military governor to join our Stormy Seas. Jen continued to knock on the table. As for Dragon Feather, give him 3 chances. If he doesn't notice the problem you mentioned just now, then Uncle Bai Yun, just tell him directly. We don't have much time to waste. The Sword Among 8 Cities tournament is about to begin. This time, I plan to take first place in the Sword Among 8 Cities tournament. I don't have much time to think about this hidden dungeon. Right. It seems like Dragon Feather and the others don't know that the military governor triggered the genie level mission. Could it be that the hidden dungeon has blocked all channel broadcasts? Jen suddenly realized this problem. Logically speaking, even the villains in the hidden dungeon should have received the news. However, Dragon Feather and the others didn't seem to have heard the news at all. Young Master Bai Yun froze for a moment. He didn't notice this either. On the forum, when the discussion about the genie level mission was in full swing, the Stormy Seas thread that had occupied the headlines just an hour ago had lost more than 10 times of its previous attention. However, after the original poster of the thread posted a new message, the number of followers increased again. After confirming, the Stormy Seas raid team 1 has successfully completed 50% of the dungeon's progress. They're the fastest among all the other teams. At the same time, under the leadership of the team leader, Dragon Feather, the raid team 1 has successfully discovered a new dungeon storyline. Breaking through 60% of the dungeon's progress is just around the corner. All players, please stay tuned. With the help of this news, the players' attention returned to the hidden dungeon. The genie level mission might take a few years to complete, but the hidden dungeon should only open in a week or two. All the players were looking forward to the Stormy Seas Raid Team 1 as soon as possible, so that they could bring this new famed sword-level dungeon to all the ordinary players. Although the military governor was known as the year's strongest newcomer and dungeon master, the dungeon that the military governor was raiding was a dungeon that had been developed hundreds of millions of times. There was a lot of wisdom hidden in it. However, this hidden dungeon was a brand new dungeon. No one doubted that the military governor could snatch this honor from the hands of the Stormy Seas raid team. Military governor, you finally come out. Have you rescued Artoria? How is she? As soon as Gahan's team left Terminal T2, they saw Ardwolf waiting at the door. It seemed that he had overcome the influence of the filth on him and returned to his normal state. Seeing Ardwolf suddenly appear in front of him, Gohan was stunned for a moment. Then, he quickly asked Hong Yu to carry Artoria to Ardwolf. I don't know the situation. Ardwolf, take a look. Is Artoria infected with the filth? Gohan asked anxiously. Let me see. Ardwolf glanced at Artoria, and his expression changed instantly. Not good. Artoria has been infected with the filth. We're still one step too late. We must go to my secret place now and remove the filth. Otherwise, when Artoria wakes up, we won't be able to save her. Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up and go to Terminal T1 and find the Marauder. Under Gohan's lead, everyone followed the same route as last time, through the T1 terminal, all the way to the T1 warehouse. After a series of twists and turns, they once again activated the Marauders and escaped from Xianyang Airport, beginning the next step of their escape mission. Ardwolf, where's the filth-removing tool you mentioned? Gohan projected the map in the air and asked Ardwolf to find the place where he hid the tool. Let me see. It should be near here. Ardwolf drew a circle on a place on the map and nodded hard. It's nearby. I have a secret base there. My tools are all hidden there. Here. Gohan looked at the location and fell in a deep thought. The location that Ardwolf pointed out was in the opposite direction from the first save point. Fortunately, it wasn't far from Xianyang Airport. It would only take about 15 minutes to get there. Ardwolf, how long will it take to remove the filth? Gohan asked again. For the team, time was of the essence. According to the previous records, the first U-level, Yuan Ko, would arrive in 1 hour and 40 minutes. If Gohan couldn't reach the first save point in 1 hour and 40 minutes, then he would have to face the U-level Yuan Ko, which was an almost impossible task. I need about 30 minutes. Ardwolf's words made Gohan's face darken. 30 minutes plus the extra 30 minutes to go back and forth. Unless Steel Centipede flew this raider like a plane, it was impossible to complete the task. No, the system will never assign an impossible task. Gohan thought for a moment and asked, Then, Ardwolf, can you wait until we reach the safe point before you start removing the filth? No. Ardwolf directly rejected Gohan's idea. When we reach the safe point, the filth in Artoria's body will penetrate deep into her bones. It's not something that can be removed with the simple tools I have. F***CK. Then what if we remove it in the car? Gohan thought of another idea. In the car, Ardwolf was a little flustered. He thought carefully for a long time and said with uncertainty, If we keep it relatively stable, then we might be able to do it. That's right. Gohan patted Artoria's thigh. Let's go to your base to get the tools and then finish the removal in the car. This is our only chance. Chapter 191. Mr. Coyote, where are we going next? Are we still going to the place where you hid the extraction tools? The high-spirited Long Yu personally carried Artoria and left Terminal T2 with Ardwolf. He then asked Ardwolf, "No, I didn't expect the filth to have not invaded Artoria's body, so when Artoria wakes up, she will return to her original appearance. I don't need to do anything anymore. Then, Mr. Coyote, come back to Yinjing City with us." Long Yu invited politely. "No, I'm not going with you." Ardwolf shook his head bitterly and then touched his chest. "Although I resisted the control of the filth just now, the filth is still hidden in my body. I may become another person at any time. Me going to Yinjing City is a time bomb for you guys, and I don't want to stay with humans. I'd rather live more freely in the wild. Goodbye, brave and powerful sword bearers. If Artoria wakes up, just tell her that I, Coyote, am dead. Let her return to the human world alone and live a normal life." After saying this very sentimental sentence, Coyote took firm steps and walked away in another direction. What a pitiful person. Long Yu looked at Coyote's receding figure and sighed. He then commanded his teammates to start looking for the raider in Terminal T1. Long Yu was very excited to be able to ride such a monster. "Stop, this is the place." Coyote rushed out of the car and then disappeared into the ruins of a collapsed high-rise. Before Coyote left, he specifically told Gohan and the others to wait here for him to go down and get the tools. There was no danger in the ruins, and it would be a waste of Coyote's time to bring a person along. A few minutes later, Coyote quickly returned to the raider with a handbag. "Hurry up and drive. I'm going to save Artoria. I'm afraid I can't drive for a while." Steel Centipede shrugged his shoulders. "Just now, Han Yu went down to solve her personal problem. If she doesn't come back, I don't have the guts to drive." After a few minutes, Han Yu, who had gone to the toilet, finally returned to the car. The Predator started the engine again, made a turn, and sped off in the opposite direction. "Magic Pen, how much longer do we have before Yuan Ko catches up?" Gohan asked Magic Pen. The most important thing right now was time. Just now, Ardwolf went to get the tools, and Hong Yu went to the toilet. They had wasted a lot of time. About an hour and 20 minutes left. Magic Pen looked at the time and added, "This is the most time we have. Maybe we only have 1 hour and 10 minutes. Steel Centipede, can you drive a little faster? Increase the speed?" Gohan wanted to make a fuss about Steel Centipede's speed, but Ardwolf strongly objected. "We can't speed up. The process of removing the filth can't be too bumpy. In fact, the speed is already too fast. If we don't slow down, the interior of the car won't be stable. I can't remove the filth for Artoria." Gohan was a little anxious. There wasn't enough time, and they still had to slow down. How could they do that? However, this wasn't the only problem. Soon, a new problem came looking for them. "Military Governor, we're running out of diesel. Because of the detour, we can't reach the previous refueling point. We have to find a new refueling point." Steel Centipede glanced at the fuel gauge and suddenly remembered that he and his team seemed to have completely ignored the problem of fuel. "I know." Faced with all kinds of problems, Gohan became calmer. "Forget it. Steel Centipede, slow down first and ensure that Ardwolf can remove the filth from Artoria's body smoothly. Magic Pen, do you have the most detailed map of the vicinity of Xianying Airport? I want to see if there is any other way." Magic Pen passed a map to Gohan, but he was helpless. Although this map was detailed, it also marked the location of many gas stations. But at this moment, the nearest refueling station to Gohan's position was more than a 40-minute drive away, and they also needed to take an extra detour. It was impossible to reach there. Gohan's eyes swept back and forth between the safe point and his current position in a straight line, trying to find a large enterprise, a large construction project, or an excavator school. Because these places required a large number of construction vehicles, they would have their own fuel depot. Perhaps they could find the needed diesel in there. Unfortunately, there is no such place. But Gohan did not despair. He still carefully looked at every possible place where Diesel could be found. At this time, Gahan found that the straight line to the safe point intersected with an expressway called Yongxian Expressway. Gahan suddenly remembered that there seemed to be a rest area not far from the expressway, and these rest areas often had their own refueling stations. Such refueling stations would not be marked on the map because they were included in the icon of the rest area. Gahan hurriedly looked around and searched along the Yongxian Highway. Indeed, not too far away, he found a rest area named Xianyang Rest Area. That location wasn't too far away from the highway, so it was within an acceptable range. So Gahan immediately pointed the location to Steel Centipede, who was driving, and asked him to reach there as soon as possible. After that, Gahan returned to the back seat. At this time, Aardwolf had completed the preparatory work for removing the filth and had begun the removal work. Aardwolf took out a very complicated-looking instrument from the handbag he brought back. The two ends were small, but there were two round, ball-like objects in the middle. It looked like a star generator commonly seen in chemistry laboratories. After taking out the instrument, Aardwolf took out a knife from his handbag. In front of everyone's surprised eyes, he did not hesitate to cut his wrist. Blood-red blood flowed out of the artery in Aardwolf's wrist. Aardwolf hurriedly opened the upper opening of the instrument and let his blood flow from his wrist into the first ball bottle of the instrument. The moment the blood flowed into the instrument, the first ball bottle of the instrument emitted a red light, and the whole instrument began to vibrate. 5 seconds after the first ball bottle flashed, the second ball bottle also began to flash, but it was flashing with a golden light. The 2 ball bottles began to vibrate at the same time, like the bucket of a washing machine. Blood was still flowing from Aardwolf's wrist into the ball bottle, and it seemed that there would be no end to it. Aardwolf's face was getting paler and paler. Just when Gahan and others thought that Aardwolf was going to drain his blood, the ball bottle suddenly made a beeping sound. Then the red light was the first to go out, followed by the golden light. But after all the light disappeared, the whole instrument began to flash with a light blue light again. Aardwolf breathed a sigh of relief and moved his wrist away. Then he quickly took out a small bottle filled with powder from his handbag and sprinkled the powder on the wound on his wrist. The wound immediately healed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon no one could tell that there was a huge wound there. "I don't have any strength left." Aardwolf, who had finished healing his wound, fell weakly on the seat. If only this driver could drive more steadily, I wouldn't have wasted so much blood, Aardwolf complained weakly. Although Steel Centipede had slowed down the car and tried to drive as smoothly as possible, the road was still very bumpy. In such a bumpy situation, of course, Aardwolf's blood could not flow smoothly into the instrument. As the instrument shook, his blood constantly dripped to the ground. A rough calculation showed that at least 2/3 of his blood had been wasted. Aardwolf, who had lost 2/3 of his blood for no reason, was naturally so weak that he did not even have the strength to straighten his body. When the blue light of the instrument disappears, open the opening at the bottom of the instrument and inject the separated serum into the hole in Artoria's chest. Then, the filth in her body will be removed. Aardwolf spent a lot of effort saying this, then closed his eyes weakly and fainted on the seat. When Steel Centipede drove the raider to the rest area of Xianyang, the blue light of the instrument still did not disappear. Gahan left UCU in the car to take care of the unconscious Aardwolf and Artoria, while the rest of them began to search for usable diesel in the gas station. Luck was on their side. There was also a tanker parked at the gas station, and there was enough diesel in it for the raider to reach the first safe point. Magic Pen and Steel Centipede were busy filling the tank with diesel, while Gahan and Hongyu ran to the top of the ruins of the gas station to monitor the surroundings. If another Godzilla appeared, it would be interesting. Fortunately, Godzilla didn't come out to mess things up this time, and all the missions were completed smoothly. But when Gahan and Steel Centipede returned to the raider, they were surprised to find that Aardwolf, who had been unconscious, had disappeared. He left on his own. UCU looked as if it had nothing to do with her. He said that after injecting the serum into Artoria, she would return to normal and he would not have to worry about her anymore. He did not want to live in the human world, so he left directly and told us not to look for him. He also said that he would silently bless us and that he would be a partner of justice and so on. I guess he wanted to leave too. After all, he had achieved his goal. Gahan did not seem surprised by Ardwulf's departure. He took out the instrument he carried with him. At this time, the blue light emitted by the instrument had disappeared, which meant that the separation of the serum had been completed. Guhan shook the instrument full of serum and said with a faint smile, "It's time to see the effect of this serum." Chapter 192. Captain, there's a Godzilla behind us. It's already discovered us and is closing in on us, Shuai Lei Xing, who was refueling at the gas station, reported. Just like Guhan's team last time, when they were refueling at this gas station, a Godzilla attacked them as well. This is going to be troublesome. Long Yu felt that this Godzilla was a bit troublesome. It wasn't that they couldn't beat this Godzilla. It was just a meteor-level Yuan Ko, so it wasn't a big problem for Long Yu's team. The problem was that Godzilla's HP was too high, so it would take a lot of time to kill it. If the universe-level Yuan Ko caught up to them, they would be dead. Up until now, no famed sword-tier swordsman or swordsman team had been able to kill a universe-level Yuan Ko at full health without using a powerful item. Captain, the Hung Mountain Sword Faction's information didn't mention this Godzilla at all. They must have tampered with the information to trick us, Munyon said angrily. In his opinion, this was definitely a trap set up by the Hung Mountain Sword Faction. No, the Hung Mountain Sword Faction doesn't have the guts to lie to us about such a small detail. Even if they really encountered a Godzilla, they wouldn't be able to defeat it. It's 60% complete, so this is probably the first time this Godzilla has appeared in the instance dungeon. Long Yu bit his knuckles. It's very likely that we perfectly saved Artoria from the filth, so the system spawned this Godzilla. Alright, even if the Hung Mountain Sword Faction didn't lie to us, what should we do against this Godzilla? Munyon's words made Long Yu fall silent. He didn't know how to quickly kill this Godzilla. From this, it could be seen that Long Yu was still a bit weaker than Gahan. At the very least, Gahan immediately thought of a plan to blind Godzilla so that it couldn't chase him without wasting too much time. What's going on? Is there anything I can help you with? Suddenly, a calm female voice rang in Long Yu's ears. Long Yu turned his head and saw Artoria in a white wedding gown. She was holding her chest as she walked out of the Marauders, one step at a time. At this moment, Artoria had completely woken up. Under Ardwulf's guidance, Merlin's magic removal scroll did not contaminate Artoria. Soon after leaving Xianying Airport, Artoria woke up in the back of the Marauders. When they saw Long Yu and the others, they almost got into a fight. Thanks to Long Yu's sharp tongue, Artoria believed that they had accepted Ardwulf's request to rescue her back to Yanjing City. However, Artoria, who had gone through many hardships, was in a very bad state. Every step she took seemed to require a lot of strength. So Long Yu had arranged for the graceful lady to take care of her and let her sit at the back to rest. Unexpectedly, at this time, she walked out on her own. "It's no big deal. There's a Godzilla coming over. I'm just planning how to get rid of this trouble." Dragon Feather replied as if everything was a piece of cake. "Godzilla?" Artoria frowned slightly. "Don't underestimate Godzilla's strength. Even if I were at my peak, it would be quite troublesome to deal with him. Once I'm entangled with you and the Nazi King catches up, everything will be over." "No problem. With our team here, this Godzilla..." Long Yu still wanted to show an attitude that Godzilla was nothing to him. This was also very rare for Long Yu. He would rarely say things that deliberately looked down on his opponents. "Help me by 5 minutes." Suddenly, Artoria said. "What?" Long Yu looked at Artoria in confusion. "Help me by 5 minutes. As long as you can hold Godzilla for 5 minutes, I can get rid of this trouble." After saying that, a light flashed in Artoria's hand, and a long sword with a blue handle and a white blade appeared out of thin air. Artoria held the hilt with both hands and stabbed the sword vertically into the soil under her feet. Then, she closed her eyes and said no more. At the same time, The wedding dress on her body began to flutter even though there was no wind. It was as if there was a stream of air stirring in her body. This is... Long Yu remembered one of Artoria's abilities from the information he had obtained. He immediately gathered his teammates through the team channel and said, "Everyone, use half of your strength and hold off this Godzilla for 5 minutes." On a road full of wreckage, abandoned buildings, and small trees overgrown with weeds, a raider was racing at full speed. It was Gahan's team. Because they had changed to a different gas station, it seemed that Godzilla did not come out to cause trouble for them. However, Gahan and the others in the car were not relaxed because they did not have much time left. It had been an hour and 30 minutes since they left Xianyang Airport. There were less than 10 minutes left until the 1 hour and 40 minutes that Yuan Ko would need to catch up to them. Steel Centipede. How long until we reach safety? Can we get there in 10 minutes? Gahan asked Steel Centipede, who was driving. Military Governor, even if you kill me, don't even think about getting there in 10 minutes. Don't even think about 20 minutes. I need at least 25 minutes. Because they had to go to Ardwolf's base and take a small detour to the gas station in the rest area, Gahan and the others had wasted about 40 minutes more than the last time. This amount of time couldn't be found anywhere else. There's no other way. Then we can only fight. Magic Brush, you fought with this level Yuan Ko before. Tell me, do you think we can block his attack? Gahan turned to Magic Brush and asked. Hearing Guhan's words, Magic Brush's face stiffened. It was obvious that he had recalled something very unpleasant. He is the Nazi king of the 10 kings of the Martyr's Palace. He is the youngest of the 10 kings. Legend has it that he killed millions of Jews in ancient times and is the leader of all the Nazis. His attacks are as fast and as sharp as lightning. Admiral, I'll be frank with you. Don't even think about defeating the Nazi king. There's no way we could defeat him. Last time, he took less than a minute to seriously injure all of our Blade Masters. Fortunately, the escape point is in this Marauder. Otherwise, our party would be banned from the game for another 3 days. It's too late. We will definitely meet him. There's not enough time. Gohan shook his head. Magic Brush opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but at this time, Hong Yu shouted again, Military Governor, she's awake. Artoria, she's awake. Where am I? Who are you? After being injected with the serum, the black stains on Artoria's white wedding dress gradually faded and withered. When they finally disappeared completely, Artoria finally woke up from her long coma. This is our raider. We are a team of sword-bearers from Yanjing City. We were entrusted by Ardwolf to rescue you and bring you back to Yanjing City. Guhan leaped to Artoria's side, held her arm, and helped her sit on the seat. Why should I believe you? Why should I believe that you aren't from the Martyr's Palace? Artoria looked at Guhan and the others cautiously. Her eyes were full of distrust. Anyone in a completely unfamiliar environment would behave like this in front of a complete stranger. We have no reason to lie to you. You were in the hands of the Martyr's Palace at the time. I don't think the Martyr's Palace would go through so much trouble to find a group of sword-bearers like us to put on a show for you. Gohan smiled. Trust us. If we were really from the Martyr's Palace, we would have handed you over to them while you were unconscious. Why would we need to run away with you? You are running away now. Artoria looked out the window, her beautiful face showing traces of worry. I can feel a familiar force chasing us from behind. If my intuition is correct, it should be an old friend of mine. Yes, we are running away. The Nazi king is chasing us from behind, Gohan answered honestly. The Nazi king, it really is him. Artoria's expression turned even uglier. Where are you running to now? This should still be Shaanxi province. You can't possibly think that you can escape to Yanjing City like this. Of course not. We have a safe point ahead that can block out intuition. Unfortunately, even if it only takes 25 minutes to reach this safe point, we won't be able to get in before the Nazi king. My fate is really terrible. I was finally rescued by you, but now I have to run away like this, doomed to failure. Artoria took a deep breath. Don't run anymore. Prepare for battle. With me here, the Nazi king is not without a fight. Artoria struggled to get up from her seat indicating that she was willing to fight. Gahan also took a deep breath and ordered Steel Centipede. Steel Centipede, stop. Steel Centipede, stop. Let's see how powerful the Nazi king is. 5 minutes later, a tank roared wildly and appeared behind Gahan and the others. If there were any military enthusiasts here, they would definitely recognize this tank as the famous German Tiger tank from World War II. However, this Tiger tank's speed was too astonishing. It was actually galloping at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. This was definitely not the speed of an ordinary tank. This tank was, of course, not an ordinary Tiger tank. It was the universal weapon of Adolf Hitler, one of the 10 kings of the Martyrs' Palace. It was said to be the most technologically advanced universal weapon on Earth, the Third Reich of Germany. Trash! A savage voice exploded from within the Third Reich of Germany. Chapter 193. Long time no see, Mr. Hitler. Your voice is still as unique as ever. Artoria slowly walked out of the marauders with the sword and the stone in her hand. Her pure white wedding dress fluttered in the wind. The wind was very naughty. Most of the time, it lifted Artoria's skirt, but the innermost part of the absolute territory could not be seen clearly. King Arthur, you're awake. The speeding Tiger tank came to an abrupt halt at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. There wasn't even a single brake mark. It had simply and abruptly come to a halt, as though it had completely ignored the concept of inertia. That's right, Mr. Hitler. Sorry to disappoint you. I'm awake. Artoria raised the sword and the stone in her hand. Mr. Hitler, you have been defeated by my sword and the stone 7 times in a row. Do you want to do it again? This time, I, who is not controlled by filth, will not let you live. Beautiful Miss Artoria, your white dress is still so beautiful. Hitler suddenly began to praise Artoria's dress in the Third Reich. However, he suddenly changed his tone and spoke in a serious and mocking tone. Miss Artoria, do you know what your descendant, George VI, looked like when he faced me? Hitler said, seemingly immersed in the memories of the past. That little guy was just like you. He knew that the glory of the empire had come to an end. He knew that under the iron heel of the Third Reich, Britain would no longer exist. But he still stood in front of me and used his ridiculous mouth to declare war on me. This is really a very interesting thing. If it weren't for Stalin and Roosevelt, your empire would have become a part of the Third Reich of Germany. What do you think of calling it the province of England? But the British Empire still won in the end. And you, Mr. Hitler, could only swallow the last bullet in your underground fortress. Artoria sneered. No, Miss Artoria. In fact, I've been living in Huaxia since then. You would never have guessed that I spent the rest of my life in Turpan. It's such a nice place. If only it was cooler. Unfortunately, there is a stinky old man who was sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who knew me and brought me to Beijing. In the end, I was not buried under the grape trellis in Turpan. What a pity. Fortunately, when I was about to die, I saw the founding father of the Celestial Empire once. He's really an amazing leader, someone that even I admire. Unfortunately, if he had led the revolution of the Third Reich, it would have been a completely different future. If only his way of governing the country was a little more brilliant. These 2 kings, who had a grudge against each other, were talking about the most confidential historical truth. Unfortunately, among the 6 raiders, 5 of them did not understand what kind of shocking secret was contained in the conversation between Artoria and Hitler. Only Guhan listened with great interest and was left speechless. Although many later generations thought that Hitler was not dead, they never imagined that he was hiding in Turpan. It was said that Hitler's confidant, Himmler, had sent 2 expeditions deep into the heart of Tibet. At that time, he said that he needed to find the Earth's axis to change history. Now that he thought about it, perhaps the real reason was that he needed to find a suitable escape route to help Hitler. Hitler actually managed to escape to Turpan and met the founding father of the Celestial Empire. If this news was announced in the 21st century, who knew how many Chinese media would go crazy? Mr. Hitler, are you done with your nonsense? My sword in the stone can no longer wait to defeat you in your Third German Reich once again. Artoria said coldly. Her body emitted a monstrous aura, as if she was being blown by a blower. As you wish, beautiful Miss Artoria. If my Third Reich can't even defeat a seriously injured King Arthur, then I, Hitler, will have no face to continue being the Nazi king. As usual, I'll use my 1,000mm cannon to have a plate of German breakfast. After saying that, the cannons of the two Tiger tanks began to rotate. As the cannons rotated at high speed, new steel plates extended out from the barrel. The entire cannon gradually became thicker and larger in a very sci-fi fashion. In the end, it became a super 1,000mm cannon with a diameter of 1 meter. My God, a 1,000mm cannon mounted on top of a tank. This is really a very scary thing. However, it was also very much in line with the style of the great German Empire. In real history, only Germany had created an 800mm cannon. It was not out of the question that our Hitler had installed a 1,000mm gun on his vehicle. P.S. Don't worry about how to install a 1,000mm cannon on the small body of tank. Germany's technology is the best in the world. There's always a possibility. Just imagine it. Boom. The Third Reich made a loud noise that could almost cause an earthquake. A thick cannon shell, like the size of a washing machine, shot out from the barrel of the 1,000mm cannon. It was very powerful. It was hard to imagine what would happen if a person was hit by such a cannon shell. Even King Arthur Artoria would not be able to withstand such a cannon shell. Hitler, a piece of sh*t, like you can't hurt me. Artoria quickly moved to the left and avoided the direct hit of the cannonball. Hitler, your aim is still as bad as ever. Artoria mocked after dodging the cannon shell. King Arthur, look carefully. Who is the target of my cannon shell? Artoria was stunned when she heard that. Only then did she realize that the target of the cannon shell was the marauders parked in the area. The cannon shell did not need to hit the marauders directly. As long as it exploded within a range of 50 meters, the marauders would most likely be dead. Military governor, hurry up and run. Seeing the cannon shell flying toward him, Steel Centipede shouted in panic. He wanted to drive away, but Gahan held his shoulder. Gahan's face was full of smiles and confidence. It's all right. Believe in Artoria. She will save us. As expected, the large cannon shell did not detonate. At that critical moment, Artoria teleported in front of the marauders without fear of death. She used her sword in the stone to cut off the fuse of the cannon shell before it hit the ground and exploded to be able to cut off a cannon shell moving at multiple times the speed of sound. Her eyesight and swordsmanship seemed to be a notch higher than Gahan's. The cannon shell fell not far from the marauders, but because there was no fuse, the cannon shell did not explode. It lay quietly on the ground like an abandoned washing machine. Cough, cough. Artoria, who had saved the lives of Gahan and the others, coughed out a mouthful of blood. Although she had successfully prevented the cannon shell from fatally injuring Gahan and the others, it had also made Artoria's already weak body even worse. Artoria, you are indeed just an empty shell. Be a good girl and come back with me. The Martyr's Palace will always leave the position of King Arthur to you. You will always be one of the 10 kings of the Martyr's Palace. Hitler seemed to be trying to persuade Artoria to change her mind. Truth be told, Adolf Hitler, the Nazi king. You don't want to live a life controlled by filth, do you? If you had the chance to do so, you would also try your best to remove the impurities in your body. Artoria stared at the 1,000mm thick muzzle of the Third Reich. It was as if she could see Hitler's face and his trademark mustache through it. Silence. Hitler was suddenly silent for a long time. After a long time, he slowly said in a low voice, "Don't say such useless things. I'm not as lucky as you, Artoria. Filth has already integrated into every part of my body. The filth's will is my will. Even as the leader of the Reich, I cannot escape this fate. There will be a chance, Nazi king. Just wait 100 years, and you will have the chance to be like me, to be freed from filth. Hitler, if you let me go today, I promise that in the next 100 years, I will do my best to free you from your fate of filth and return a great leader to the world. Artoria said very sincerely. Don't waste your breath, Artoria. The filth will not agree. The filth will not agree, and I will not agree either. Today, I must bring you back to the martyr's palace. Whether you live or die, you must go back with me. After saying that, the German Third Reich, which originally looked like a tiger tank with a thickened barrel, transformed into a steel robot the size of a human through complex mechanical changes in an instant, just like the robot animation in Japanese manga. However, Hitler's German Third Reich was even more powerful. It could ignore size and the laws of physics. From a monster the size of a tank, it became an object the size of a human. Moreover, there was a pilot inside, the great Führer Comrade Hitler. This was Hitler's super invincible single soldier armor, the Third Reich, which he created in a two-dimensional world by combining the most powerful technology in the entire German Reich. Artoria tightened her grip on the stone sword in her hand and rushed toward the Third Reich like lightning. The Third Reich did not use any weapons. It only used a pair of indestructible iron fists forged from mysterious metal to block Artoria's sword. At the same time, dozens of small, unmanned attack vehicles flew out from the back of the Third Reich. Each of these unmanned attack vehicles could shoot deadly death lasers at Artoria from dozens of directions at the same time. For a moment, Artoria was surrounded by enemies and was in danger. Military Governor, what are we still watching here? Hurry up and send the Blade Master to fight with Artoria? Seeing such a fierce battle, Steel Centipede could not help but feel excited. He wanted to immediately send his Blade Master to help Artoria fight against the evil Hitler. No, now is not the time for us to make a move. Let's wait and see. Gohan replied calmly, who knew what he was looking at. Chapter 194. The Storm of Waves team was indeed the strongest team among the famed swordsmen. Against a giant beast like Godzilla, the six of them worked together to attack it from the front to the back. The Sword Maidens left many wounds on its body, and they managed to stall Godzilla in place, preventing it from attacking Artoria and the other Sword Maidens who were not far away. Delaying for 5 minutes wasn't a difficult task. If it weren't for the Nazi overlord chasing after them, Long Yu was confident that he could grind the 10 million HP monster to death with enough time. Captain, time's up. MOU, who was responsible for watching the time, reported to Long Yu. Long Yu turned to look at Artoria and found that the light from the sword and the stone in her hand had condensed to the point of explosion. Suddenly, the sword and the stone that was stabbed into the ground slowly rose up. Then, Artoria raised it above her head. Seeing this scene, Long Yu's eyes flashed, and he immediately ordered everyone, retreat. All Sword Maidens, retreat. Artoria's skill is ready. The lady swordsmen who were fighting Godzilla just now received the order from their sword bearers. Without any hesitation, they vanished from Godzilla's surroundings and returned to their sword bearer's side. Godzilla was at a loss when he realized that the mosquitoes that had been pestering him had suddenly disappeared. He thought that the mosquitoes had hidden somewhere, so Godzilla stood where he was, desperately trying to find the traces of those mosquitoes. Godzilla's motionless behavior made him a living target. While Godzilla was searching for the Sword Maidens that had disappeared, Artoria, who had been holding the sword in the lake with her eyes closed, suddenly opened her eyes and uttered the word. As soon as Artoria uttered the word, an earth-shattering aura suddenly rose from the ground. A strong wind seemed to blow out of nowhere, blowing so hard that the sword bearers around Artoria could not open their eyes. As Artoria chanted the second incantation, the entire world began to change color. The originally clear sky instantly darkened and turned gray as if it was the end of the world. The strong winds suddenly turned into 6 huge tornadoes, blowing the surrounding ruins and debris into the sky. The surrounding sword bearers immediately summoned the sword ladies back to their swords. With the help of the sword ladies' strength, they were able to remain standing and not be blown away by the tornado. With such a skill that could change the color of heaven and earth, Godzilla would be a pig if he didn't react. He finally looked at the core of the great change and saw Artoria holding her great sword high in the air. Roar! When Godzilla saw Artoria clearly, he immediately let out a loud roar, but he didn't attack Artoria. On the contrary, the Godzilla took a few steps back, turned around, and ran. It was unknown if he knew the terror of King Arthur Artoria, or if he had sensed this skill that could destroy heaven and earth. Unfortunately, Godzilla's actions were too late. Artoria's skill preparation was complete. Curry stick, curry stick! The moment Artoria used this skill, the world lost all its light. The world within a radius of 100 kilometers dimmed. At the same time, it seemed that all the light that had disappeared was concentrated on the Sword of the Lake in Artoria's hand. This time, the Sword of the Lake was frighteningly dazzling, like the light at the center of the sun. Dragon Feather and the others didn't expect the light of this skill to be so dazzling that it blinded their eyes. Even though their eyes had been strengthened by the Sword Ladies, they closed their eyes the moment the light shone, but they were still blinded by the light. It was as if their eyes were pierced by countless sharp needles, and the pain was unparalleled. They covered their eyes and rolled on the ground crazily. This skill of Artoria was really powerful. Just the light it emitted was enough to blind the eyes of the 6 top sword-bearers, causing them to lose most of their combat ability. If they were hit by this skill head-on, it was hard to imagine what kind of damage they would suffer. Sword of Promised Victory. This was the Chinese name of Artoria's skill. Artoria condensed her faith and the king's power in the Sword of the Lake to cast this skill. It was said that the strength of this skill changed according to the degree of Artoria's faith in the heart of the king. When Artoria's faith was at its strongest, the Sword of Promised Victory could even kill a Yamada no Orochi with one strike. That was a Super Yuan Ko with 8 heads, and each head had the power of a universe rank. Together, they were at the peak of the universe rank, the Super Yuan Ko. The current Artoria naturally couldn't compare to her peak, but the Sword of Promised Victory was not something that a mere meteor rank Yuan Ko Godzilla could withstand. After nearly a minute, Long Yu and the others finally regained their basic vision. When they saw the world in front of them clearly, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. With Artoria as the center, there was a fan-shaped crack with a radius of more than 30 kilometers. This was the size of half of the city. Within the area covered by this crack, there was only a deep pit about 300 meters deep. Thick smoke constantly rose from the soil, and at the center of the deep pit, the soil was covered with colored glass. Under the extremely high temperature, the quartz in the soil had become colorful glass. As for the Godzilla, perhaps the black thing in the center that looked like coal was the Godzilla of the past. After releasing the Sword of Promised Victory, Artoria once again fell to the ground and fainted. Even if Artoria was at her peak, releasing such an ultimate skill would still be a huge burden, not to mention that Artoria was now in a half-crippled state. Let's go. The Nazi king is about to catch up. Long Yu carried Artoria and directly rushed into the Marauders. The rest of the team also jumped into the vehicles and began to speed toward the first safety point. In another dungeon, Artoria's battle with the Nazi king had already lasted for 5 minutes. Facing the humanoid mecha form of the Third Reich, Artoria's body was already riddled with holes. Blood dripped from more than a dozen wounds on her body. Artoria was panting heavily, and she could collapse at any time from exhaustion. Kneel before the Third Reich, King Arthur. This is only the first form of the Third Reich. If it transforms into the second form, you will instantly turn into ashes, Hitler said arrogantly, seeing that Artoria was already a fish on the chopping board. Nazi king, don't even talk about your second form. Even if it's the third form, do you dare to use it to take my Sword of Promised Victory? Artoria forced a smile. Her words and smile made the Nazi king feel like he was being ridiculed. Artoria, do you still think that you are at the peak of your power 300 years ago? Do you think that you can still defeat my Third Reich with a single Sword of Promised Victory? The Führer said through gritted teeth. If you have the guts, stand here and take my Sword of Promised Victory. Artoria sneered. Let me add one more thing. Back then, you were not defeated by my Sword of Promised Victory, but you were crushed by my Sword of Promised Victory. Trash. My third German Reich shall take on your sword of victory and the promised sword. The Nazi king pushed Artoria away with a punch. Then, the Third Reich, which was originally only the size of an adult, let out a sharp screech. The entire mecha began to transform into an extremely complex mechanical transformation. Finally, it became a spaceship that was full of the beauty of a sci-fi metal spaceship. That's right, it was a spaceship, a 5,600 meters long and 480 meters tall invincible spaceship, Atlantis. According to the legends of the Germanic people, they were all descendants of the Atlantean people from Atlantis, and the strongest combat weapon of the Atlantean people was this Atlantis spaceship named after Atlantis. This was also the final form of the Third Reich. In fact, the original name of this invincible weapon was Atlantis. No matter what form it was called Atlantis. It was just that in the hands of the Führer, it was forcibly named as the Third Reich. I hope you don't regret this. Artoria stabbed the sword into the ground with both hands, preparing to perform the terrifying power of the sword of promised victory in another dungeon. I will not repeat the process of preparation. 5 minutes later, an attack that was not much weaker than the sword of promised victory and the sword of victory that Long Yu and the others saw landed. The dazzling light dissipated, and Guhan's team discovered that the huge Atlantis mothership had become battered and exhausted. About 1/3 of it was completely destroyed, and the various cannons that were exposed outside were all damaged, suffering serious damage. I don't know if it can still fight again. I don't know if Atlantis can fight again, but Artoria really can't fight anymore. She was still like Artoria in another dungeon. After using the sword of promised victory, she was so tired that she fainted, and her injuries were even more serious. Trash, King Arthur, your strength has declined too much. If you were at your peak, I, Adolf Hitler, could only escape. But now, I still have the strength to kill you. I still have one main cannon left, but as soon as the head of state finished speaking, a 1,000 caliber laser cannon on the Atlantis began to move its muzzle slowly. Probably due to the damage, the muzzle did not move very fast. According to the speed, it would take about 30 seconds to aim at Artoria. Now is the chance. Military Governor, let's go save Artoria. After watching the battle, Steelman's blood was boiling. That's right, Military Governor. Right now, the Nazi king only has one main cannon left. The Nazi king, who was heavily injured during the Third Reich, cannot return to the Second Reich and First Reich. All we have to do is save Artoria and destroy the main cannon, and we'll be victorious. We will defeat the Nazi king. This is the chance that Artoria gave her all to fight for us. This is also our only chance. Military Governor, give the order. Yu Sikong said excitedly. He was right. With the strength of Gahan's team, they could defeat the Nazi king with only one main cannon left. This was the best chance. We retreat. Guhan's lips trembled. He glanced at Artoria, who was lying on the ground, bleeding profusely. He closed his eyes and made a decision. Chapter 195. Long Yu asked a few questions in one go, and Yuan Ko answered all of them. Ahem, it's fine. Don't we still have 2 goblins? Long Yu was a quick-witted fellow. Even though he was embarrassed for a moment, it didn't affect his performance. These 2 goblins were originally going to Old Tree Root Forest. Let them lead the way for us. Long Yu was dumbfounded. This was very awkward. He didn't know where he was right now. Just now, when he told them to follow the directions on the map, it was like a slap to his face. I don't need you to control them. I will. Long Yu laughed coldly. Next, he just had to repeat what he had done to the goblins. He didn't need to think of a way to tame the giant wolves. He directly used the demon's soul sword to control the souls of the giant wolves and sped in the direction Long Yu wanted them to go. Not bad, this is the clue. Dragon Feather was quite excited. Everything was going very smoothly. This is an order for these 2 goblins to go to Old Tree Root Forest to investigate. There's a meteor grade essence soul demon nearby, and it suspects that our human stronghold is in that forest. Everyone, let's follow the directions on the map and head to Old Tree Root Forest as fast as possible. Long Yu was about to leave when Mani pulled his sleeve. He asked with a bitter expression. "Captain, where are we going? Where are we now?" System notification. Mission 9. Find a new safe spot. There may be clues to a safe spot nearby. Please find the clues and head to the safe spot. Please note that the second universe level, Yuan Ko, has already detected your position and is chasing after you. Please escape to a safe spot nearby as fast as possible. Understood. The team members nodded and dispersed. Long Yu carried the unconscious Artoria and searched in a certain direction. Ever since they had dealt with Godzilla, Long Yu had been responsible for carrying Artoria, whether it was hiding in a safe spot or breaking through the small teleportation array of Yuan Ko. Just like Gohan, Long Yu developed some special feelings for Artoria. Is your mission to investigate the old tree root forest? Fortunately, according to the goblins, there was a great wolf tribe nearby that had tamed a type of great wolf that could be used as mounts. They had planned to go to the great wolf tribe and ask the great wolf tribe's chief to send them to old tree root forest. Even though the two goblins resisted with all their might, under Long Yu's overwhelming strength, they only lasted a few seconds before their eyes rolled back, and they were completely controlled by Long Yu. Yes. Upright Gentleman nodded, took out a scroll of sheepskin, and handed it to Long Yu, explaining, "I found this on the bodies of these two goblins, but I can't understand the magical beast language, so I don't know what's written on it." Do you know where the old tree root forest is, how far it is from here, and how long it takes to walk? However, Long Yu was different. He was extremely talented and was a language genius to begin with. After studying with young Master Bai Yun for more than 10 years, he knew all the common languages between humans and Yuan Ko like the back of his hand. It was naturally no problem for him to read the demon beast language. He only took one look and understood the contents of the sheepskin. These two goblins' mission was to shake up the old tree root forest, and they knew the way there. However, the old tree root forest was more than 50 kilometers away from here. If the team ran at a constant speed, it would take at least 3 hours. By that time, the second level, Yuan Ko, would have caught up with him. It wasn't that Long Yu and the others didn't have these skills, but there was no need to use them on these weaklings. Is the clue nearby? Long Yu looked around and found that he was in a vast expanse of white snow. This was Bing City, but it wasn't Bing City. It seemed to be a forest near Bing City. After hundreds of years, there might still be traces of the city, but the village had completely disappeared. The entire forest seemed to have returned to an uninhabited ancient era. It was a pity that Yao Ming was only a goblin. Against the powerful, famed sword mistress, he was easily captured by the sword mistress, one in each hand. That's right. The next safe spot is at the old tree root forest. Long Yu projected the map on his personal terminal and searched for a while on the map. He quickly found the location of the old tree root forest and marked it heavily in red. Do you know where we can use transportation nearby? But Captain, what if these two goblins lie to us and lead us to a dangerous place? Gentleman Upright asked worriedly. Gentlemen, did you discover anything? Long Yu asked quickly as he glanced at Gentleman Upright. Don't worry, it's just two ghost-level Yuan Ko. My demon soul sword can control them. Long Yu released his demon soul sword and reduced the two pitiful goblins' HP to half. Then, he used the demon soul sword's two tentacles to stab into the goblins' brains. The giant wolf tribe was a medium-sized tribe near Bing City. The strongest was naturally their chief, a nether-level Yuan Ko. He had dozens of dragon-level giant wolf riders and a few hundred ghost-level giant wolf rider servants. All in all, this was a strong force. Everyone, choose a direction and split up to search. If you find anything strange, report to me. The clues are nearby. The heavy snow had sealed off the mountain, and as far as the eye could see, the area around Long Yu was completely covered in snow. Any clues would have been covered by the snow. Long Yu immediately ordered everyone to move towards Gentleman Upright's position. At the same time, Gentleman Upright entered the small building to scout the situation. When Long Yu and the others arrived, Gentleman Upright had just finished scouting the small building. Behind him was his sword maiden, who was holding two large goblins in each hand. These two goblins weren't very large. They weren't even as large as an adult. Compared to normal goblins, these two goblins were like Yao Ming among goblins. Good. We'll go to the giant wolf tribe and borrow their giant wolves. Long Yu sneered. That's right. What I'm worried about the most is transportation. The teleportation formation is on a small island in the middle of a lake. The marauders can't reach there. If we use the formation, we'll lose our only means of transportation. If the safe zone is too far from here, then the quest will be difficult. However, as I said earlier, the system will not give us a dead end. Who knows? There might be a means of transportation hidden in this instance dungeon. When you're looking for clues, you must also pay close attention to see if there are any suitable means of transportation nearby. Do you understand? System prompt. Quest 8. Pass through the small teleportation formation. You have passed through the small teleportation formation and arrived at Bing City, which is 1,000 miles away. Dungeon completion rate, 70%. Leader, this is going to be troublesome. Where are we going to find clues? Munyon's brain wasn't working very well. In his eyes, everything was white. Everything was covered in snow. There was no way he could find a safe place to hide. If an ordinary famed sword-level party had come here, they would have needed to lure out the Flood Dragon Giant Wolf Knights and kill them one by one. Then, after eliminating the leader's wings, they would begin to surround and attack the Nether Giant Wolf Chieftain. This was a normal strategy for ordinary players, but for the Stormwaves party, it was meaningless. They could just charge in and kill their way in. They didn't need to use delicate techniques like luring the monsters or positioning themselves. However, in the face of the ferocious Storm strategy team, the Giant Wolf tribe was simply not enough. It was simply a massacre. Countless giant wolves and orc knights were beheaded. Even the young wolves and orcs were no exception. This was the rule of interaction between humans and U-Engine. They would never show any kindness or tolerance to the other party. This was a battle of life and death. However, Feather Dragon had left 7 giant wolves alive. Each of the 6 famed swordsmen rode one giant wolf. Artoria lay alone on the giant wolf's back. Feather Dragon was responsible for looking after her. Feather Dragon's judgment was correct. The clues were easy to find. After a few minutes, Righteous Gentleman reported back. He had found a small concrete building that hadn't been completely covered in snow. It seemed to have been left behind by a villager. Leader, we've never ridden a giant wolf before. What if we can't control them? Mou couldn't help but feel worried when he saw these wolves howling and attacking him after having their companions killed. These giant wolves already viewed him as their enemy. How could they willingly accept Moyu's control? We'll have clues soon enough. Feather Dragon was calm when he heard Munyon's worry. I've said it before. This dungeon is prepared for ordinary players. The clues won't be hidden in some secret place. Although there's nothing here apart from snow, if we find something else, the clues will be there. Let me see. Long Yu took the parchment and read out the magical beast language without any difficulty. Magical beast language was a common language used by Western magical beasts in Yuan Ko's faction. Since magical beasts had a very different mindset from humans, it was difficult for humans to learn and recognize magical beast language. Most of the famed swordsmen couldn't recognize this strange language. You're worthless. Long Yu used the Imperial Soul Demon Sword to cut off the heads of the 2 goblins. Long Yu already knew the way to Old Tree Root Forest, so these 2 goblins were useless. Chapter 196. Sinner, you should be punished by the heavenly fire and thunder. Suddenly, Hammurabi, who was fighting with the immortal sword-rank swordsman, raised his stone statue of the Codex of Weapons and declared his judgment to the escaping hovercraft. Hammurabi was a great king. He unified the entire Mesopotamia and expanded Babylon's territory to its greatest extent in history. At the same time, under his leadership, he built the Hanging Garden and the Tower of Babel, which were said to be able to communicate with God. However, everything fell apart after Hammurabi's death. After learning that the Ian rank Yuan Ko, one of the 10 kings of the Martyr's Palace, had become a human and left Yuan Ko, and that he wanted to return to Yanjing City. Logically speaking, The two swordsmen didn't believe this. But seeing the confident expressions of Long Yu and the others, the two swordsmen had no choice but to believe it. Hammurabi was the sixth king of the Babylonian kingdom. He was the first to unify the Mesopotamia and ruled the Middle East region with Iraq as its core. So Long Yu only needed to solve a math problem and bring away the three most powerful and useful teammates. The rest would stay here and wait for the final result. Actually, Long Yu didn't have much to worry about. First, he had to go. The remaining two could only be the gentleman and the graceful lady, the husband and wife duo with the strongest combat power. Although they didn't have the special sword ladies like the twin swords as a husband and wife, they had some unusual methods. Sinful sword immortal. Don't even think of stopping the advancement of the Law King Hammurabi. Waves of anger could be heard coming from the mountain range. From the sounds of it, the second one to arrive was the Law King Hammurabi of the Martyr's Palace. System notification. Quest 10. Leave Bing City incomplete. You have contacted Yinjing City and received help from them. Follow Yinjing City's instructions and rendezvous with Siping City's swordsman team. Dungeon completion rate 90%. However, Hammurabi's greatest achievement wasn't the Hanging Garden or the Tower of Babel. Rather, it was the creation of the most complete and systematic set of laws found in human archaeology, the Code of Hammurabi. This was also the origin of Hammurabi's title as the Law King, because Hammurabi controlled the power of law. After waiting in the safe stronghold for nearly 4 hours, Long Yun and the others suddenly felt an earthquake outside. An NPC swordsman recklessly opened the barrier and saw an earth-shattering battle raging on a nearby mountain range. The entire forest was engulfed in a sea of fire. This is the aura of an immortal sword wielder. He has already entangled that Yuan Ko. We must retreat immediately, shouted the NPC swordsman. He ran to the center of the stronghold and summoned a hovercraft from his dimensional pocket. As expected, they received news from Long Yu and learned that they had arrived at the observation point near Bing City. They immediately gave new instructions. System notification. Mission 10. Leave Bing City region. Use the Safe Zones communication system to contact Beijing City. Get help from Beijing City and think of a way to leave Bing City region and return to Beijing. Half an hour later, Dragon Feather successfully met up with the sword bearers from Siping City. The final quest of this dungeon had finally begun. Sinner's blood. In the judgment of the law, you are guilty. You deserve the punishment of 1,000 cuts. Hammurabi, who had been beaten up by the sinner's blood sword immortals, angrily inflicted the punishment of 1,000 cuts on the sinner's blood sword immortals. Thousands of swords flew towards the sinner's blood sword immortals, but they were all blocked by the sinner's blood sword immortals. The law of Hammurabi is the law that judges sinners. Only those sinners who are guilty and try to avoid will be judged by the law. Those who are not guilty, the law cannot be imposed on them. Dragon Feather quickly explained to the NPC driving, if you turn to avoid, it means that you are guilty, and these meteorites will definitely hit us. Only those who have a clear conscience, who charge straight without turning, will not be judged by the law. So we cannot turn, we must go straight. What Dragon Feather said was true. This was a detailed explanation of Hammurabi's abilities in later generations. This Law King was later attacked by the sword bearers from the Immortals' Sword Immortals during the Battle of the Valhalla. Although he was rescued by the 100-level Yuan Ko, he was gravely injured. After that, he had not appeared in the world for hundreds of years. In reality, these two people's strength was about the same, and neither could do anything to the other. After fighting for a while, Hammurabi seemed to forget his true goal and began to fight the sinner's blood sword immortals. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Dragon Feather and the others successfully escaped from the Law King's pursuit and began to advance towards Siping City. A few minutes later, the safety base's disguise was completely removed. A large patch of snow parted, and a hovercraft flew out from the ground. Then, it sped towards Siping City at full speed. Everything went smoothly. Dragon Feather and the others successfully arrived at the old tree root forest and very smoothly found the secret entrance to the safety base disguised as a large tree in the forest. When Yinjing City's correspondent reported this news as a joke to his superiors, they received great attention from their superiors. A Yinjing City's communications director stood guard in the communications room, waiting for new information. So they chose to contact Yinjing City and prepare to receive orders from them. Turn, avoid these meteorites, an NPC sword wielder shouted. The other NPC sword wielder in charge of driving turned the steering wheel violently, trying to avoid the meteorites. What was even more fortunate was that there was a sword wielder in this stronghold. When Dragon Feather knocked on the door, the two of them almost started fighting. Fortunately, the sword wielder confirmed Dragon Feather's identity and let them into the stronghold. In this world, the sword bearers always had a high level of trust in the other sword bearers. No one would suspect that their own kind would stab them in the back. Because of the long history of humans living together for warmth and self-preservation, every human had developed a very noble character. Even if they betrayed humanity as a traitor, the sword bearers would rather die than stab their own kind in the back. This was the result of the education and environment they had received since young. Okay. The NPC sword wielder finally chose to believe Dragon Feather's words and drove straight towards the area where the meteorites landed. Things were just as Dragon Feather had said. Although these meteorites landed very close to the hovercraft, none of them hit the vehicle. Dragon Feather and the others successfully avoided this attack. Yinjing City had already sent a sword wielder of the Fairy Sword tier to the vicinity of Bing City to stall the pursuing universe level Yuan Ko. Dragon Feather and the others were ordered to stay in the safety of the safety base until the sword wielder could stall the universe level Yuan Ko. Once the universe level Yuan Ko was stalled, they would immediately board the hovercraft and rush to see Ping City to meet up with a team led by a sword wielder of the Spirit Sword tier there to receive new orders. King of Law, you dare to be distracted in front of my sinner's blood? Do you want to die? Seeing that the target he was protecting had been attacked, the sinful blood sword immortal, who was in charge of tying down the Law King, became furious. His sword mistress raised her hand and released a flurry of crazy sword lights, fiercely attacking Hammurabi. In a moment, Hammurabi was in a state of chaos. A few minutes ago, Yinjing City's communication center had received Dragon Feather and the others' message. They had also received news of King Arthur and told Dragon Feather and the others about the existence of the small teleportation portal, which allowed them to be teleported to Bing City, which was thousands of miles away. We can't turn around. Just go. Speed up. Just rush over. Dragon Feather pressed down on the shoulder of the NPC who was driving, preventing him from trying to turn around. We only have one hovercraft in this stronghold, and it can only seat 6 people. Out of the 6 of you, 3 of you must stay here and wait for us to come back to pick you up. Out of the 6 spots, 2 were for the NPC sword wielder, and Artoria also had to be taken away. Thus, there were only 3 spots left for Dragon Feather's team. This meant that Dragon Feather had to let 3 people stay here. It seemed like a choice between life and death, because the people who stayed here might be killed by the enraged universe-level Yuan Ko. In reality, the death rate of staying here was quite high. System notification, Mission 11, Return to Yinjing City with the sword wielder team from C Ping City. Please be careful. The 3rd universe level, Yuan Ko, has begun to hunt you down. Yinjing City is unable to send a 2nd Fairy Sword tier sword wielder to protect you in a short period of time. You can choose to find a secret location and wait for the 2nd Fairy Sword tier sword wielder to escort you 10 hours later. Alternatively, you can choose to return to Yinjing City. However, after fighting for half a day, all of Hammer's abilities had been grasped by the sword wielder, which was why the records were so detailed. However, in reality, this was not a matter of life and death. After all, this was still a dungeon, and the 3 people left behind were all players. If they saw that they were about to die, they could just escape from the exit of the safe stronghold. Trust me, there's no mistake. At the same time, Yanjing City requested that Artoria's life be protected at all costs. Even if all the sword wielder died in battle, they had to complete this mission. System notification. Mission 9. Find a new safe location. You have found a safe location. Dungeon completion rate, 80%. Almost a second after Hammurabi's judgment, the skies suddenly turned fiery red, and hundreds of blazing meteors fell from the sky. Their target was the hovering flying car that was running wildly. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.